to talk about boys and their toys, hopefully disclosure. So, a real quick bio on Grant. Grant is a recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. He became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May of '75 with personal sightings of a UFO type object, which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. And there's a book called Tales of Charlie Red Star, so check that out. These sightings led to a decade of research into the early work done by the Canadian government into flying saucer phenomena. Grant became the authority on the program, and from here, Grant proceeded to do almost 3 decades of research into the role of the presidency of the United States in the UFO mystery. He's one of the foremost authorities on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and their UFO connection. Most of that research is found at the president's UFO website, which is presidentialufo.com, or in 2 recently released books, the Clinton UFO Storybook and Managing Magic, the government's UFO disclosure plan. After experiencing a mental download event in February of 2012, Grant turned his research interests away from the nuts and bolts research to the role of consciousness in the UFO phenomenon. This new research has expanded out to the possible involvement of extraterrestrials in modern music and in the aspects and inspirations and downloads in science discoveries, inventions, Nobel Prizes, music, art, books, near-death experiences, meditation, and with individuals known as savants and prodigies. Grant's lectured widely in Canada, the United States, and in Europe. He was one of the 40 witnesses that testified in front of 6 ex-senators and congressmen in Washington for the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure. And he has appeared on many television documentaries on UFOs and has been interviewed by nearly 100 radio shows and clearing a series of appearances on Coast to Coast AM. And with that, Grant Cameron, thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And the floor is yours.
Okay. You can't see my background here. Where's my background?
Yeah, we got your background.
Oh, you got the background. Okay. Yeah, the pyramid. Do you know what the pyramid is? That's a North Dakota story. That's it's called Nixon's Pyramid. It has to do with my original sightings in 1975. I had no interest in UFOs at the time. The only reason I went out to this small town called Carmen, Manitoba, was the fact that UFOs were being seen all the time there. This is February 1975 it started. And I went out there because they had got this thing on film. If you're familiar with the Nimitz story, where the UFO goes from 80,000 feet down to sea level, a TV crew here in Winnipeg actually caught the thing going from the ground to 5,000 feet in 3 frames of film, so 1/8 of a second. When I saw that, I said, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. We went out there and I saw this object. So the object behind me, and many years later, it'd be 30, 35 years later, I was going to do a lecture on Charlie Red Star in the United States. I went to the guy who owned the airport in the town. I said, Bob, what the heck? Why would they come to Manitoba? Why would aliens be interested in Manitoba? He said, you know why they're here. I said, no, Bob, I don't know why they're here. It's been 35 years. I have no clue why they went to this small little town, 2,000 people, grain farm, nothing of any interest, no military, no industry, nothing. And he said, I told you in 1975. I said, Bob, I do not remember. He said, the missile silos. I told you, it was the missile silos. I go, oh, yeah. And of course, and we used to travel to the United States. Nobody really travels to the United States anymore. A lot of Winnipeggers used to come down to Grand Forks and to Fargo. In fact, my first night of my honeymoon was in Fargo, but don't get too excited because that marriage didn't work out. So we used to go to North Dakota, and people would buy cheap cigarettes and cheap booze, and now everybody goes to Mexico. It's not really cheap to go to the States. But anyway, what happened was he told me it's the missile silos, but we had always gone down to North Dakota, and we would drive along, and you'd see the missile silos in a field. There'd be a fence, and what the heck is that in the fence, And you go along, and so when Bob told me it was the missile silos, I went, oh yeah, the missile silos. So the idea was that in February of 1975, this thing behind me, it's called Nixon's Pyramid. It's in Tacoma, North Dakota, which is about 20 miles south of the border. And it was the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in the United States. There was going to be 3 of them, one in Malmstrom, one at Warren Air Force Base, and I think one in Tacoma. And the idea was that if you're going to do a nuclear exchange with the Russians, They wanted to catch the Russians at that
Wasn't
time,
that
like
what Ukraine?
was that?
Wasn't the exchange with Ukraine, not Russia?
Well, no, the nuclear exchange. Like, so we're talking nuclear war back in 1975. The whole idea that
Oh, okay, okay.
so what you're doing is you're protecting. Everybody thinks that if what you want to protect is Washington, New York, Los Angeles. Nobody could care less about those cities. What you want to do in a nuclear exchange is you got to protect the missiles. And if you don't protect the missiles, it's game over. I mean, you're game. So North Dakota at 1975 had 300 nuclear missiles. The story was that if North Dakota had been a country, it would have been a nuclear superpower. There was 300 nuclear missiles, Minuteman III nuclear missiles with 10 warheads on them. There was the one field was the Grand Forks field, which had 150 nuclear missiles. That has all been disassembled. But the Minot base is still operational, and it's got 150 nuclear missile silos, and they're spread over North Dakota. So that's what you want to do. So what they had was this radar site behind me, which is called Nixon's Pyramid at Tacoma, North Dakota. And what it would do is he would try to pick up the Russian missiles as they were coming over the horizon, coming from over the Arctic. Now we have satellites and stuff like that, so you really don't need it. And so this went operational. And what they did is they put 100 new nuclear missiles into North Dakota. So you had 300. Then they put 100 in this field near this Nixon's Pyramid at Tacoma, North Dakota. And the idea was that to protect the missiles. So if the Russians launched a missile, they're going after North Dakota. So you guys are gone. And even now, I mean, if there's a nuclear attack, you guys are finished because they're going to take out your missiles. You guys have the missiles, so you're number one target. And what they would do is they would have these missiles, and they would have the 5 megaton ones that would try to intercept the Russian nuclear missile in outer space. If that one missed, then they would have these small sprint missiles that would go up and detonate above the site and create this flak. So the Russian missile coming in, the nuclear missile, would get shredded. And this is the idea. They would protect the missiles by launching these other missiles to try to intercept the missiles as they're coming in. Then it'd be November of 1975, there was negotiation with the Russians, and they realized that because you could send, phony missiles, every 10th one had a missile in it. There was no way you could protect the missiles. So they signed an agreement in 1975 to take this only operational anti-ballistic missile unit out of North Dakota. And what happened was they put the missiles in February of 1975. That's when the sightings started on our side of the border in Carmen, Manitoba. And in November 75, that's when they shut the missile site down. And by February of 76, they had all the missiles out of there, and the UFOs all stopped. So that was where Bob was saying that's why they were here. They were here, and he said, well, the Americans were chasing them, and so they were trying to get away from them. And they would come across the Canadian border, which we always made the joke. It's like, why would they come here? And it was like, because Canadians at that time, the beer was much stronger alcohol content. And we said they're coming for a beer run. They're coming from the United States. They're picking up beer and they're going back to the United States. But so that's how this whole thing started. And I had a lot of engagement with North Dakota. And I'll go over a couple of sightings that I dealt with in North Dakota, and then we'll go to. I had a bunch of. I was trying to think which presentation. I've got 4 presentations I've never given, but the one I'm going to do is what does the government know about UFOs? So of course I'm a Canadian, so I'm going to tell you Americans exactly what's going on with the government. And they always said that about the president. Said, how come the expert on the U.S. presidents happens to be a Canadian guy? I said, well, and I told him the story about how I was looking for the highest level officials I could find, because when I saw the UFO the first night, it was like, oh my God, there's miracles. There are actually these damn UFOs. I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it was actually for real. And then the second night, the thing came right at me, and it sort of flew back where it came from, and I'm going like, wow, as this thing was slowly flying away, and I went, wow, this is amazing. This is uh, amazing. But the thing was, I'm going, well, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. And so I started on this thing. I said, well, I don't know what's going on here, but somebody's got to know what's going on. And that's when you did the bio. What I did is I first went to the Canadian government through a synchronicity. A guy worked in my father was a pilot for the Canadian government. A guy in the office had worked on the program, which was very bizarre synchronicity. I went to the Canadian government, what the Canadian government knew, and then they squealed on a guy by the name of Dr. Eric Walker, who's the highest level official that's ever talked about UFOs. He's a former president of Penn State University, had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. And we actually wrote a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants, which talk about all the conversations we had with Dr. Walker in the 1980s and the early 1990s. And he basically told us exactly what was going on. And he basically said, you're up against the windmills, you're wasting your time, you're never going to figure this thing out, you're not going to be given the answer, what are you going to do with it when you get it? All these kind of things. And then he popped the big question, which came to me in this download in 2012. He said, let me ask you a question. So when you figure it out, what are you going to do? I've asked that to lots of people and nobody has an answer. They say, well, we need to know. And it's like, well, no, it's like, you don't have a need to know. It's like, because if it gets released, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell it to your friends? I mean, it's, if Lockheed loses the contract, and what, you're going to take the contract and give it to somebody else when Lockheed put a bunch of money in it and stuff like that. So I was following all this stuff and went to the president, and then had this download experience, which basically I was basically told, this has got to do with consciousness. This has got nothing to do with nuts and bolts. This is not really aliens. This is consciousness. And if you get down that road, and that's turned out to be true. I've worked on that now for 12 years. I've been in this as of next May. It'll be 50 years that I've got in it. And I can absolutely guarantee people that this has got to do with consciousness. This is not what people think it is. But today I'm going to go through some of the sightings in North Dakota that I dealt with, and then this whole idea of this chase of trying to find the highest level officials I could in the United States and listen very carefully to them or talk to them and see what they're saying in terms of what does the government actually know. So I did the one with the Nakoma thing. I put that in the Tales of Charlie Red Star, that whole thing. And now I've just talked to a producer out of Toronto, and apparently the whole story about the nuclear missiles in North Dakota and Charlie Red Star is perhaps about to appear on Netflix. They put it to Netflix, so you may see the story about North Dakota and the missiles and what happened in 1975. So I had that. The other thing that I had in 1975 when I had my experience is there was a very famous abduction. I used to deal with the National Enquirer at the time. Bob Pratt was the National Enquirer. He had come up to Manitoba, and he had they were going to call Manitoba the UFO capital of the world. We just had so many sightings. And he came up, so I got to know him fairly well. Actually, for one or 2 days, I actually worked for the National Enquirer. I had to do an interview for them. They, instead of flying the guy back, they gave me the job to go and interview some people. And one of the sightings that they were very interested in from the National Enquirer was the Sandy Larson case, and that happened out of Fargo. If you know the story, she was going Fargo, Bismarck. She was at Beaver, North Dakota, and I actually went there. I've been there a number of times to try to locate. What I discovered when I discovered the nuclear missile connection is I went to Beaver, North Dakota, and if you actually look on the old maps of where the missiles were in the Grand Forks days, there was actually two nuclear missiles within about 2 miles of where she was abducted on Highway 94 going towards Bismarck. So that was a big case. You got to remember, back in 1975, there was really no abductions. There was the Betty and Barney Hill, there was the Schumer case in 67, this police officer in Nebraska, and there was the Pascagoula 73, then the Sandy Larson one in 75. So those were the four big cases. Then Travis Walton happened at the end of 1975. And I always point out to people, you got to realize the synchronicities of this whole thing, that the phenomena is running the show and that everything links together. When you start looking at it, it links together. For example, Travis Walton, it was taken in November, beginning of November 1975, same year as me, the same year that Bud Hopkins got hauled down the rabbit hole, the first year that Stephen Greer did a C5 encounter, and the same year that Linda Howe got involved with the UFOs over Maelstrom in 1975. So all of us got dragged into this thing. So Travis Walton in 1975 was gone for 5 days. What most people don't realize, and I pointed this out, and it hasn't got much attention, but every single day that Travis was abducted, every day that he was gone, there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo or a nuclear weapon storage area on the northern tier bases in the United States and Canada. Most people don't realize that. So there's this connection. So 75, we were basically following the Sandy Larson story. And then in what we had in 75, we had the big sightings here. In 76, we started to get what we call ground lights. So now they call them orbs, and you'll see the Skinwalker Ranch, and they have the orb story, and they go like, it's like they discovered orbs, and it's like, come on, give your head a shake, man. You guys are like, just fell off the turnip truck, man. This has been going on forever. In fact, if you go back to the first, the Kenneth Arnold sighting, you will see that Kenneth Arnold described these objects as being alive. that these things were alive, they were flying. And then when he went home, there was orbs in his house. So the orb connection, and this is a book that I've got coming out called, it's going to be called The Big Game. I was going to call it the Super Bowl, but somebody told me I would be sued. But it's going to be a 2-part book, and it should be out within a month or two. And basically, it looks at all paranormal phenomena. It shows you how all paranormal phenomena are connected. And basically, what it says is, you think this is just nuts and bolts UFOs? No, it's paranormal. It's all the things. It's all paranormal. And I call eventually going to do a book called The Theory of Wow. And the theory of wow basically says that the UFO phenomena, what they're doing is what I call the Jesus circus. So they go and they walk on water, and everybody goes, oh my God, they're walking on water. And then it raises someone from the dead. They go, oh my God, he raised somebody from the dead. And then they feed 5,000 people, and they go, oh my goodness. And everybody's all embedded in the story and what's going on and how's this happening. And then they give you the message, the Sermon on the Mount, or the whatever you've done unto the least these my brothers of Matthew 25. That's when they give you the whole sermon. But you got to get people's attention before you give the message. So that's what they're doing. They're doing all this. They're not doing anything. They're just doing this weird stuff to get you to go, what is going on? How is this possible? How can people go through walls? What are they abducting people? And why are they going around the military planes? They're just trying to get everybody's attention. That's what they're doing. They're raising consciousness, because the more we talk about it, the more the consciousness rises, and people are going to figure it out. They're not here to be Big Brother. They're not here to give us stuff. This is not socialism. They're not here to give us anything. They're here to make us curious, to get us to figure this thing out. So in 1976, we saw these ground lights, and I know they were orbs because the first night I got very close. I got within about 50 feet. There's a famous story that I was actually going to jump on this thing. I had an 8mm movie camera. I was filming. I was 50 feet away from this thing. It was on a bridge. And after that, we never really got that close. Second, we got a little bit close one other time, but for a year we watched these we called them ground lights, these things, and they would be reflective. People will make fun of Stephen Greer because he flashes lights at them. Let me actually assure you that when you flash a light at a UFO, it will reply. It's very responsive to lights. So we'd have these things on the ground, and we'd flash lights at them, and they'd flash back, and we would photograph with infrared film, and we're doing all this kind of stuff. And then in 1977, I got a call from north of Bismarck, North Dakota, that people in the town were being followed by these white lights. These white orb lights were following cars around. And I said, well, that's exactly what's happening on our side of the border. So I actually went down there. I can't remember the name of the town was. It was maybe 25 miles north of Bismarck. And it was like a small town with like one building where people met, and there was one store or whatever. And this place was jammed. I mean, it was like, you couldn't get in the place. There were so many people who were interested in this sort of thing. Now you got to remember that when you're north of Bismarck, that's the Minot missile field. So it was very active, and these lights were there around the missiles. And so the last case I want to refer to is this used to be the MUFON director of North Dakota a few years back. His girlfriend, they brought me down, and she had an encounter with a nuclear missile. And this happened at Coolsruth, North Dakota. You can look it up. It's still there. It's still an operational silo. In fact, the head of MUFON from North Dakota, we were there, and of course I'm a Canadian, and it actually has on the fence, if you go to Area 51, on the fence, they've actually taken off the lethal force is authorized off the fence at Area 51, but it's still on the fence at Coolsruth, North Dakota. It says, if you get in here, we can shoot you. And so the head of North Dakota MUFON was photographing, and he's waving at the camera, and I'm going, what the hell are you doing? You're an American. I mean, I'm a Canadian. I mean, if they grab me, man, I'm never coming out of jail. Like, what are you doing? They quit waving at the camera, and I was just petrified. But what happened was this happened in 1988, and what they used to do in the town is the kids would go to the missile silo, and what they would try to do, if you've been to one of these missile silos, they have sort of a tall white sort of pole there, and there's I think it's a yellow light on top of the pole. They would try to get the light to go off. So the boys would climb over the fence, and they would make the alarm go off, and then they would climb back over the fence, and they'd run like hell back to town, because it was only about half a mile to town. And then they'd all laugh when the security forces would come to the missile silo. The girls wouldn't. They would throw stones at the fence to try to get this thing to go off. So these 3 girls were at the fence, and they were throwing stones at this at the fence. And then what happened was the one girl said, she said, the UFO came out of that that came up, and it was about 25 feet in the air. It was copper, and it looked like it had burn marks on it. And I said, "Where did it come out?" She said, "Came out of that.
Sorry, guys.
It comes out of that missile thing, that metal thing." So the UFO would come right out of the missile silo. This is an operational U.S. missile base, and then she wet her pants. She was totally petrified, and she went home and she suddenly became precognitive. She was able to predict people's deaths. It was just a fascinating case. So that happened in Coles Group, North Dakota, and so you have this very clear missile connection. The other thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about is Stan Romanek. Very famous. He's now sort of, nobody wants to talk about him anymore. But Stan's father worked on the missile silos outside of Fargo, North Dakota. That's where, and there's actually some documents that were leaked to him from a general talking about UFOs in North Dakota and stuff like that. So I've got my connections to North Dakota. But what I want to show today is I want to show this presentation that I've never shown before, and it's got to do with what does the U.S. government actually know about. Oh, I need my screen. Somebody has to give me permission to share screen here. It says I'm disabled. There we go. Okay. So now let me put my glasses, my binoculars on here and get the right. And so here we go. Let me close this window so I can see here. Not that it matters. So there's not much you can do about it anyway. But anyway, this is the book I wrote called Tales of Charlie Red Star. You can see that. And this one that tells the story about North Dakota. Wilbur Smith. Wilbur Smith was the first thing that I went to. My father had this synchronistic connection to a guy who worked on the Wilbur Smith program. Wilbur Smith ran the Canadian government UFO program from 1950 to 1954. They will say, no, he was part-time. We got actual documents. He was the actual official guy who ran the program. He's the guy that wrote the top secret memo that said UFOs are real. It's the most highly classified secret in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush who are trying to figure out how the UFOs are operated. And the Americans have said it's of tremendous significance to them. And then the line that came in my head in 2012 in this download experience, and we're also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. That's extremely important because already in 1950, the Americans knew to tell the Canadians that mental phenomena was involved with the UFO phenomenon. How would they know that? The first contact with an alien wasn't until 1952, a couple days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb, when Adamski had the encounter in California. So how would the Americans know that mental phenomena was involved? And later on, we realized that the crash in Roswell had involved a live alien. The live alien was talking in people's heads. So if you're U.S. military or intelligence, you go, oh my God, it's talking in our head. Would we love to be able to do that? So the Americans knew, they knew how to control it, but they knew that mental phenomena was involved because they had a live alien that was talking in their heads. And now this is the book I wrote about the Canadian government UFO story, and I tell the whole story about what Wilbur Smith did, about how they opened a base for UFOs to land. They were dealing with an alien by the name of AFA, who also was involved with the CIA and Navy intelligence and the FBI. And there was an encounter that I'll be talking about in an upcoming book in July of 1959, where at the National Photographic Interpretation Center, where they analyze all the U-2, the SR-71, all the spy photographs at this building, they actually had an encounter where they channeled an alien by the name of Alpha, the same one the Canadians were dealing with. And that was the beginning of this government communication program in the United States, trying to engage the UFOs. And this book will include that, and I will tell the full story of the Holloman Air Force Base story, which is an actual real event. It was confirmed by President Bush Sr., and it happened in May of 1971, and this is where the UFO lands. There's an encounter between officials at the base. Generals were flown in from the United States into Holloman Air Force Base. And I was very good friends with the producer, whose name is Bob Emenegger. And Bob was given access to all this by government officials. He put it in a documentary called, on the internet, if you want to look at it, it's called UFOs, It Has Begun, 1979. You'll see this whole idea. And I remember telling Bob, I said, Bob, this is kind of weird. You know, you got this Holloman story, you got these 3 UFOs come, they hover, 2 of them go away, the one lands, the aliens come out. I said, you know, if it weren't for the location, if it weren't for the time of day, you said it happened in the morning, if it weren't for the time of day, this sounds just like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he said, what, I didn't tell you? I said, no, you didn't tell me what? He said, I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Steven Spielberg in 1975. I said, no, you didn't tell me that. So Steven Spielberg had a copy, and he said, I told you, Annie Spielberg worked for me. Annie Spielberg was Steven Spielberg's sister. She worked for us. She was a line producer in our production company, and they did hypnosis and UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And she had said Steven wanted a copy of the documentary. So after Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, Bob told me that Steven Spielberg's mother came to him and said, you know, Steven, you know, Bob, I've seen your version of the landing, and I've seen Steven's version of the landing, and I like Steven's version better. So that's where Close Encounters of the Third Kind comes from. It's an actual event that happened in May of 1971 at Holloman Air Force Base. So I'm going to tell that whole story in a book, along with this other contact that was done at the CIA. So the government's been busy trying to interact with these intelligences, and that's one of the things you'll identify as to what they knew. This is a famous letter. It was written in Canada in 1959. This is Wilbur Smith writing to Caswell. He says, I have no objection to your efforts to have my articles published in your local paper, but I would request that all biological material concerning myself be omitted. For your information, every nation on this planet has been officially informed of the existence of the spacecraft and their occupants from elsewhere. And as nations, they must accept responsibility for any lack of action or for any official position which they may take. There is nothing more to be done along these lines, and effort in this direction is wasted. He ran the Canadian government UFO program. He was a contactee. We kept this very secret for many years. He had radio communication with beings. Fascinating story, and I tell it in this book, the Canadian government UFO story. Here's another document that was written about this, and they talked to him about he died in 1962, near the end of his passing. He was being asked by a lot of people about hardware. What about the hardware? And Smith replied that it was not the U.S. Air Force, but a small group high up in the government who controlled the material. Upon further questioning, Mr. Smith refused to identify the group to which he had referred and quickly led conversation into other channels. So Wilbur, what was happening was the Americans were sending material into Canada to be analyzed. And I talked to the metallurgist who worked on the program, and his name was Art Bridge. And I said, Art, how much material did you actually handle? And he said, tons of it. There was all sorts of material coming in from the United States, and Wilbur, they were analyzing this material. And at one point, when I showed him the MJ12 document and this reference to the memory metal that was recovered at Roswell, he said, I think we analyzed that. I think we actually handled that piece of metal. So the Canadians were very involved. And then what happened was AFA, this alien in this encounter that was happening at the CIA, they said, we want you to, if you watch the documentary, they say, well, we want some proof. And then the guy he's doing automatic writing, this Navy intelligence guy, he goes from automatic writing to talking. He said, what do you want? And then Art Lundahl, who ran the Weird Desk, he was the top UFO guy in the CIA, said, we want you to show yourself. And the guy replies, when? He said, now. Go to the window. And they go to the window, and you'll see Robert Friend, who ran Project Blue Book, on this documentary looking out the window. And he said this UFO flew, middle of the day, flew right over the Capitol. And so Wilbur Smith wanted them to fly over Ottawa, which is the Canadian capital. They had a flying saucer observatory set up there on government property, on high secure property there. And it was supposed to happen August the 1st, 1954. It actually happened a week later. And Wilbur Smith said they were there at the station, and suddenly all the bells and whistles went off that something was flying over top, and they went running out. And it was overcast. They couldn't see it. Wilbur Smith went on the record. He said, well, if there's nothing wrong with the equipment, we've just detected the first flying saucer over Ottawa, Canada. That was it for the government. Game over. Shut the program down. We didn't discover anything. And Mr. Smith is not allowed to make any more statements on behalf of the Canadian government. So Smith was a major figure back in the 1950s. They shut him down in 1954. He died in 1962. He made a lot of statements, and a lot of that, I put my entire collection of files without editing anything is on the internet. If people want to search it out, it's all there. All Smith's material. We recovered his files. When he died, he told his wife, they're going to come for my files. I don't care who it is. Don't give them the files. They're going to try to destroy my files. And she said, as soon as he died, the Americans came, the Russians came, the Canadians came, all asking for the files for research purposes. She said, I burned them. And she said, at that point, they started breaking into the house. And she had moved them to her son's place, whose name was James. And James actually tells me the story in an interview that I've shown on some broadcasts, where he said at the end of his life, he went to his dad, and his dad was dying of cancer and knew there's nothing more they could do to him. He said, Dad, did they have the craft? And he said, yes. He said, I was taken to a base outside of Washington, D.C., and I saw the craft and I saw the bodies. And of course, I asked James, I said, well, were the bodies grays? He said, no, they weren't grays. As far as I remember, they were just small people. And because Wilbur had said they could pass on the street. He would know them, but you wouldn't know them. They could pass on the street. So very interesting story that the Canadians were way ahead of the Americans in terms of, and Wilbur Smith was very open. He didn't really hold anything back. He basically said, yes, we've handled tons of material. And so I went after a bunch of people. Salant was one of the main people. He was the guy, the sort of the top weapon guy in the United States. And I'm asking him at this point, I'm asking him about Suffield. He said, I recall that we also indicated that UFOs would be welcome if they landed at Suffield. Now, Suffield is this is the story I went to Wilbur Smith's wife, because there was a story that Paul Hellyer had told in 1967 in Canada. He said, you know, they were building a base outside a city, and it was sort of like a tourist base for UFOs to land. It was a tourist type trap. And he said, this is the first time we built a UFO landing base. We actually had one in 1954 at Suffield, Alberta. Nothing ever landed, therefore UFOs don't exist. So I and another researcher started in the 1970s going after Paul Hellyer and say, well, Paul, how did the UFOs know where to go? How did they know where to go to Suffield? Suffield is a base in the middle of nowhere. How did they know where to go? Somebody had to have communication. So when I went to talk to Wilbur Smith's wife, who's still alive in the 70s, I went to her and I said, I showed her the article. I said, hey, was Wilbur involved in this? And she read the article. Said, yeah, it was Wilbur. And I said, so what happened? She said, well, Wilbur told them, if you stop trying to shoot the thing down, I'll land it at a base. And they said, oh, okay. So they made the agreement that AFA, this alien, would land at Suffield, Alberta, which is like an Area 51's no fly zone, this sort of thing. And it went to the military, and it went to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is the federal police force, and it went to the Canadian cabinet. And they made the agreement they were allowed to land. And then Smith said, well, Alpha wants an agreement that once you talk to him, he will be allowed to take off again. And it went to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They said, yes, this will be allowed. The military said, yes, this will be allowed. And it went to the cabinet, and they said, no, we can't give a 100% guarantee we were allowed to take off. Wilbur said, that's it. Nothing's landing. That's why it was called off. Wilbur Smith called it off. The government didn't call it off. That's why nothing ever landed there, because they wouldn't give a guarantee that they would allow this thing to take off again. But here's the top weapon guy in Canada actually admitted that, yes, he remembers some story about them being at Suffield. No one appeared exactly, but they sort of jammed the story. Here's Wilbur and his wife, and I interviewed his wife. She was ready to talk. She said that, you know, they'd stolen patents from him, they embarrassed him and stuff. So when I finally went, I was a young guy at the time. She was so impressed that this guy flew across the country to come talk to her that she put me in contact with all the people who had worked on the project. There was only about, after he died, there was only maybe 6 people, and they were very hidden as to who they were. They were government officials in different departments who were working with Wilbur, and they were working on gravity control experiments. They had this plate that they were spinning at 17,000 revs a minute to try to produce anti-gravity. So you can see that this goes back a long way, and that we've had a lot of answers for a long time as to what's going on. Let's skip this. This is a lot of people will say, if you go back to the original story about the Aztec crash, and I don't know how long you people have been in this game, but this goes back to 1950 when there was a book written about the Aztec crash, and they said, oh, it was hoaxed, and this Silas Newton was he was selling this thing to find oil, and he was a fraud and all this sort of stuff. I found this in one person's research at the University of Arkansas, which was very important. And this talks about Newton became acquainted with several high-ranking geophysicists who had actually seen downcrafts and occupants. And according to Sherman, through the intervention of Wilbur Smith, electronics expert and organization or Project Magnet in 1950-54. The official Newton later actually saw the humanoids himself. Now, the important part of this is everybody said Newton was a hoaxer, but how did Newton know that Wilbur Smith had access? Because Wilbur Smith, nobody knew that Wilbur Smith had seen the bodies, knew where the bodies and the crafts were until 1962 when his son talked to him. This is already, Newton is walking around, which means that Newton actually saw the body, that Newton's story is probably true. The whole Aztecs thing may have been changed. It may have been the Roswell crash and they changed it to Aztec, or they get, phony information. But it's kind of interesting that you would find this document later on that showed that Wilbur Smith had actually given access to somebody in the United States to see the bodies. Now, this has to do with your government. You have three branches of government. You have Congress, executive, and the judiciary branch of government, which has to do with how this thing is being covered up. This is Jim Semivan. He's one of the people that I say, you listen to everything he says, you listen to the interview 5 times. Take everything this guy says to the bank. This is a guy who had the beings in his room in the early 1990s. He's very upset about it. And he says very clearly, and I'm the only person that talks about this. So he says, and he had 3 briefings. He talked, if you listen to his interviews, he said he had 3 briefings. He actually had a briefing where an official came to him at CIA and said, we'd like you to get a conference room for 6 to 8 hours. And he said, these guys walked into this room and they had this briefing for the whole day. And he said, these guys scared the living daylights out of me. And he said, these guys were scientists and guys from contractors, and they had as many clearances, many tickets as I had, and they had a do not escort patch for the CIA. They could walk around the CIA. He said these guys were high-level people, and they gave him a briefing which went on for hours and hours and hours, and he talked about 2 to 3 briefings. So this guy's been briefed. He said he knows about the communication program, which I'm going to write about in this book, about the government trying to communicate with the aliens. And he also says he knows what the legacy programs are, but he's not going to talk about it because it's classified material. So here's what he said happened. I'm the only one that's sort of pointing this out. So he said, so I think what happened in the very beginning, I think what happened is probably Eisenhower in the early 50s got this whole topic of UFOs and UAPs under control, probably executed a presidential executive emergency action document, which is pretty interesting. Now, if you look it up, it's actually called a presidential emergency action document. And what it is not many people know about these, but the president has rather extraordinary powers where under extraordinary circumstances, he can come out and say, okay, we are going to do X, Y, and Z. And this is who we are going to tell. And this is who we are not going to tell. That is pretty much it. That has pretty strong legal precedence. So there apparently has been 20 of these things written. None of them ever has leaked. None has ever been declassified. And basically a lot of this stuff has to do with what's called continuity of government. So if you were sum up where I say this is being run, it's being run out of it's being run out of Mount Weather. It's being run out of the Special Facilities Division. Mount Weather is the headquarters of FEMA. So if you were going to have a nuclear attack, you're going to have an alien invasion, the people that need to know is FEMA. These are the people who are emergency action people. So these are the people that have to be briefed. And the story was told by one of Stephen Greer's witnesses that Mount Weather is where the UFO program was run. And then we've found some other material that indicates, yes, it was the Special Facilities Division inside Mount Weather. So when there's a nuclear attack, this happened in 9/11, it happened a couple other times, where you immediately move the president and the cabinet into Mount Weather because you've got to protect them. And so even if say the White House is taken out by a nuclear attack, there's a government in waiting. People don't know this. There's government in waiting. And what they do is they move all these people to Mount Weather, which is nuclear proof. And Mount Weather, of course, because if there's a nuclear attack and it takes out Washington, well, then you've got no communication from the White House anymore. Mount Weather is set up so there's communication with all the military, all the ambassadors around the world, all the CIA people, all the intelligence people. It's all wired in there for the president to run the World War III out of Mount Weather. So this is what he said. It's probably an executive emergency action document, which would be a FEMA document. And this is what it's about. So what Semivan says is now you have this whole thing of Congress is saying, oh, we got the right to oversee this. And Semivan says, no, not necessarily. If it's not a congressional thing, if it's run by the executive office of the president, then you have no oversight on this if it's one of these presidential emergency action documents. So this is something that people are sort of missing. They're sort of thinking that there's this illegality, and I'll show you, Semivan and others point out, no, there's no illegality here. This has all been set up many years ago, and it's been challenged in court, and that's the way it works. So you have two different things. You have security clearance and you have need to know. So security clearance, people don't realize this. So need to know is what I say. People say, oh, we need to know about the whole program. No, you don't. You need to know if you're working on the program, if you're guarding a flying saucer. But if you, as George Bush told Jimmy Carter, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. Just because you want to know, that's not reason for you to know. And security clearances is different. So the Congress was talking about, oh, this is illegal. What you got to realize, and people don't realize this, all security clearances in the United States are controlled by one thing. It's not controlled by law. Everything is a law, security clearance. Security clearances are all issued out of the executive office of the president. So in 1942, Roosevelt started secret and confidential. Then Eisenhower added top secret. Then he added the code word, the special compartmentalized information code word, and all that kind of stuff was added on. It's all run out of the White House. So you'll hear people saying, oh, I've got a security clearance 19 levels higher than the president. BS, you do. The president doesn't have a security clearance. The president can do whatever he wants. That's what the Donald Trump thing was about. Donald Trump said, I can declassify documents in my head. The president has total control over documents. He can declassify whatever he wants. He can do whatever he wants. And this is the whole idea. He runs the security clearance. So if you've got a security clearance and you're working in some facility, it comes out of the office of the president. It doesn't come out of the Congress. So you got to keep this idea that security clearances are different than laws. This is Wilson. I missed the thing here, but Wilson, this is one of the things that I always point out. I'm the only guy that's actually leaked documents. I mean, you got a lot of people who they're talking about cover up, and then you get the UFO people, they're covering up as well. I leaked the Wilson leak document. I leaked the alien autopsy document. I leaked the advanced physics theoretical working group notes. I leaked the document on the UFO study for President Johnson. I leaked the document on the study that was done by Douglas Aircraft in 1968 on UFOs, spent $500,000. I leaked all this stuff. Nobody's leaked anything. I mean, this stuff is all there. And so the Wilson leak document was Wilson coming up against this program and being told you don't have a need to know. So you may be the head. He was the head of intelligence for Joint Chiefs of Staff, but that doesn't mean your program doesn't involve UFOs. You don't need to know. And this is where this need to know thing comes from. That unless you're working on the program, the more highly classified it is, the less people you're going to have on the bigot list, the less people are going to have access to the program. So one of the big people that's pushing this whole thing is Tim Burchett. So he's talking about this thing. There are tens of millions of dollars that are being spent investigating these things. We've had departments tell us that they have recovered units. They won't release full documents. Everything's covered up. This is not the first time Burchett has accused the Pentagon of withholding information from Congress that would prove the existence of extraterrestrial life. What you got to realize, as Jim Semivan points out, that people like Burchett, if you're in Congress or in the Senate, you are briefed at a secret level. It's a very low level, unless you are the Appropriations Committee, Armed Services Committee, or Intelligence. Those people have top secret clearances. They may have code word clearances. They may have a nuclear Q clearance. But if you're Burchett and you're being briefed at a secret level, this is the equivalent of you flying around at 2,000 feet. And what he's saying is people aren't being briefed. How the hell would you know that? What I point out, and there's a guy by the name of is a CIA guy that dealt with Hollywood, and he said the CIA only has one job. The CIA's job is to provide the best intelligence possible for the President of the United States, the executive branch, and the Gang of Eight in Congress. That is all. They don't sell steaks. They don't sell cars. That's all they do, and they provide the best intelligence they can for the people at 60,000 feet. So if you're Burchett flying around at 2,000 feet, how would you know who's been briefed at 60,000 feet? The only people that are going to know the people that were briefed at 60,000 feet are the guy who gave the briefing and the guy who got the briefing. And the guy who got the briefing at 60,000 feet, if it's the president or the Secretary of Defense, is not going to be telling people at 2,000 feet what's going on. This is the whole idea. People have these assumptions. They're just making stuff up. They don't know. They're making these accusations, and they really don't even understand how the security program works. Again, and what I say is, he's talking about the Illuminati. And I say that what the government would want, the people, or not the government, the people who are controlling this cover up, what they want you to do is they want you to believe in the Illuminati. They want you to believe that there's some deep organization that's running the government. That's what they want. They don't want you looking in the right place. They want you down some dark alley in France looking for the Illuminati, because then you're going to spend the rest of your life and you're going to waste your time because you're looking at the wrong thing. That's what they want. So Burchett they're using this sort of thing. And basically it came down to the fact that if Burchett or Luna or any of these other people in the House who are complaining and say, we want hearings and we want this thing covered up, what you got to realize in this, how the government works in the United States, the President of the United States does not write law. The President of the United States enacts the law. The laws of the United States are created by Congress. So if you don't like the UFO cover-up, get off your fat butt, write a bill and get it passed, put it through the Senate. It'll be vetoed by the president. You override the veto and it becomes law. That's how law is passed. It's not by the president. If Burchett and his partners who want this thing disclosed write a law and get it passed, the president of the United States has to follow the law. But what they're doing is they're sort of blaming the president of the United States when they are the Illuminati. They are the people who are writing the law, and they have, and I will state, they have written this into law. This did not happen. It's like the whole idea about the crafts. We want the crafts back from the Lockheed and all these contractors. And the question is, how did the contractors get the crafts? It's the government gave them the crafts, because the government is not into building flying saucers. They don't know how to build a flying saucer. They don't know, so they bring in the contractor that is an expert at aviation and try to figure it out. So you gave them now they spent billions of dollars, all the contractors on this, and now you're going to say we're going to take it back, and we're going to give it to our friends, or we're going to sell it, or what are we going to do? So what you got to realize is that if the law is going to be changed, if you don't like the law, get it changed but what's happened, if you remember the Schumer-Rounds amendment, it was passed 18-0 in the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, and it went to the House, and three guys in the House, the three mics, blocked the bill. They said, we're killing the bill, and they can kill the bill. And because what happened, it went to the House Speaker, and it became a party vote. So he said it's a party vote, which means if you don't vote along the lines of what I'm saying you're going to vote, you're out of the party. So everybody had to vote, and the bill was killed. So they killed the bill. But basically, the whole idea was that there were 6 more Democrats in the House in 2022. We would have full disclosure today, because these 3 mics that blocked the bill would not have been the head of the Armed Services, the Intelligence, and the Speaker of the House. They would not have had any power. The whole thing would have gone through, and we would have had disclosure. 3 guys, end of story. 3 guys blocked disclosure. And as long as you have this divided House, and they can't, pass a bill to, create a map for the bathrooms, you're not going to have disclosure, because the same 3 guys, like now they have this other bill. They said, we're going to send this other bill to the House. The same 3 guys are going to block it. And for whatever reason they're blocking it, they can block the bill. That's what's happened. One guy can actually block a bill in the House. This is what Eisenhower warned about in the early days. He said, beware the councils of government. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military, industrial, congressional complex. This is the last speech that Eisenhower gave. What you got to realize is the word congressional was taken out of the speech because they didn't want to offend Congress. What you have now is you have the military industrial congressional complex who are running the show. And what happens is the example I use is Lockheed builds the F-35 jet fighter. The F-35 jet fighter is built in 47 different states. Why is it built in 47 different states? Because if there's suddenly a cost overrun and suddenly it costs twice as much money, nobody's going to vote against it because everybody's got their hand in the cookie jar. Everybody's getting money from Lockheed to run their campaigns, and everybody's got people right in their district. Everybody's got factories, so nobody's going to vote against it. That's what they do. They get everybody in there, and that's what Eisenhower warned. Once you get this circle going where everybody's making money and everybody's in the circle, you can't stop it. So the budget keeps getting bigger. The defense budget, it's like, near $900 billion now. And what I say is anybody thinks that they're going to shut down the $900 billion defense budget and everybody's going to go get an honest day job, better give your head a shake. It's not going to happen. Once you get that much money and that much power, you can't shut it down because everybody's making money on this thing. And that's sort of the main problem that you have, is that you're up against this behemoth that everybody's compromised, and there's nothing you can do to really stop it. But we were warned about it. and here I said again, how did the contractors get the crown? So initially, the initial contract was given to Battelle. So in 1947, Roswell crash took place, and if you've seen the documents, you'll see that Battelle started to do stuff on nitinol, the metal called nitinol, memory metal. That came from the Roswell crash, and it was done by Battelle outside of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And what you do is use sole source contracts. So what happens is the military or the intelligence will go in and they'll do source contracts. So they'll say, Battelle, you can't. If you're in Roswell, people don't realize how this game is played. So if you're in Roswell and you recover a craft, everybody says, well, we need openness. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to a magazine where they have industry reading this magazine, and what you're going to put an ad in the magazine and say, oh, we recovered a craft at Roswell, New Mexico, a flying saucer, and we'd like people to bid on a contract to look at the craft and back engineer the craft. You can't do that. So that's why they use sole source contracts. And sole source contracts means that you put the contract out to one person, and a lot of times it's going to be your friend. You put it out to one source, and you have a lifetime guarantee that you will never ever release who is working on the contract. So the government is working in secret. The contractors are working in secret, and that's one of the problems you have with disclosure. Is not only you got to get the crafts back, but you have to out the sole source contract. And Elizondo's pointing this out is if you see that Lockheed got a craft and you had an aerospace company and Lockheed suddenly became this massive aerospace company and you went bankrupt, then it's lawsuit time. There's billions of lawsuits that are going to be filed on people who lost money because you gave the craft to this guy, you didn't give it to me. There's all these complications about how stuff is done, and everything is done. So if the CIA steals intelligence, computer technology from Russia or Taiwan or something, you're going to use a sole source contract again. You can't really say we stole computer technology from Taiwan and we want people to come and back engineer this stuff. You can't do that. You can't go public. You've got to use a sole source contract, all very secret. And that's how this whole system has been built. And the problem is that you've built the system, and as everybody's mother has probably told them at some point in their life, you made your bed, now lie in it. This is the problem we've got. We've built this system with laws and regulations, and it's just got more complex and more complex. And now how do you turn this thing around? This is one high-level official told me. This is where I say the book I'm going to write is called Secret, the Defense of Non-Disclosure and the Search for Real Disclosure. Real disclosure is going to come from experiencers. It's not going to come from the government. It's going to come from experiencers. And this is something that nobody will touch. Elizondo will not touch it. Miller will not touch it because we don't want to get painted with the crazy brush of these experiencers. Well, you'll see they won't touch it. You'll see that James Fox will not touch it in his documentaries. Everybody wants to be cool. Everybody wants to talk about technology and call it the boys and their toys. If you have disclosure panels, you'll never see an experiencer on a disclosure panel. We don't want to hear about the experience. We don't want to hear about your contacts with the aliens. Nope. Just talk about metals and technology and stuff like this. So when we get to technology, we're going to have more faster cars and more accurate AR-15 rifles, and we're going to have better bombs that are more accurate, stuff like that. All we're interested in is technology, boys and their toys. And it's not. It's got nothing to do with that. Even the phenomena even warned at one point, do not go down the technology road. It's a trap. Now, here's what a high-level official, I think the highest level official in the Canadian government that briefs the president said, because we cannot track the phenomena. We cannot track the phenomena, so we track the people correlated with the phenomena. The lights in the sky produce no usable information. On the other hand, there are many different types of contactees with many different insights, and maybe there are even visitors. And this is the whole thing. So if you're a contactee, why would they not look at you? Why would they not figure out why they're talking to this person? It is the people who are the contacts who are dealing with the intelligence. You are not going to solve the UFO phenomena. You're not going to get disclosure until you talk to the people who are talking to the intelligence behind the phenomena. Lights in the sky don't tell you anything. Green ones, red ones, who cares how many fast they're going, stuff like that. The idea is you've got to go to the people, and the high level people know that. So, and I think I'll get into Chris Bledsoe with his sort of thing. What is this slide? This is this idea, and Bell Bigelow's talked about this, and so has James Lukatsky, who ran the big OSAP program. This is the idea that they've been given technology and they're going to hang on to it. James Lukatsky, we've invested a lot of our personal resources into research. It's going to be difficult to pry loose technology when something's been given over to a private company who has invested their money, their stockholders' money in the research. It's pretty, if this is free enterprise America, you can't just go in and take someone's patents and grab them and give them to someone else. If these guys invested in this stuff, that's what Bob Bigelow said. They asked him, "Are you in favor of disclosure, Bob?" He said, "No, I'm not in favor of disclosure. I'm in favor of confirmation. This is proprietary." So Bob Bigelow was the contractor who ran the OSAP program. And he's got the 100 reports that they did. He knows all the stuff that they did with the Defense Intelligence Agency. And he says, "I now own it. I'm a billionaire. I now own this UFO technology." And as you know, they tried to do another one called Conan Blue, which was not 22 million. It was up to 50 million. They tried to get another thing financed that Bob Bigelow probably would have run. And basically, these contractors get the money from the government. It's like spend the government's money to do all this stuff. And then if you're the contractor and you get this technology, if you're the government, how do you take the technology away from the company? And especially if the company's invested their personal money. So I wrote this book called Beyond Managed Magic, Tangled in Secret. I've written 4 books on UFO disclosure. I've got 2 more coming. And this sort of explains how this is actually done in the background, rather than just whining and complaining about, "Oh, we need the answer. Why doesn't the government just hand us the answer?" And as you'll see in the end, basically, guys, they haven't got a clue. they got bodies and crafts, but they haven't got a clue what's going on. This is Bob Bigelow saying, "There are also companies involved, and they have proprietary rights to the information. From national security perspective, you cannot blame the government for wanting to protect itself. You cannot fault the leadership for wanting to do what is best in the interest of its people to protect them from worrying about a lot of things." And he says, "You get into disclosure and speculation never ends. You have every radio talk show constantly talking, speculating, and trying to raise the temperature about the public angst about the topic unnecessarily." And he says, "I've got the technology. We'll take care of it. Just pay your taxes and shut up." Here's Jim Sigmund again. I say this is one of the guys you got to listen to. If you gave this to private industry, you would have to form a sole source contract, which are highly protective of individuals and corporations, where the government is not allowed to reveal their identity. And he said he wrote a lot of sole source contracts for the CIA on all sorts of different things, not UFO stuff, but it's all done through sole source contract. You've got to protect the companies that are working with the CIA. You can't out them. And that's what we want. We want to out the contractors and the people who are working for the contractors, so Putin can find them. They got their phone numbers. They know exactly who's working on the project. And if you go back to Area 51, you know, Bob Lazar told the story. In Area 51, there was 22 or 24 people working on the program at Area 51. And he said at one point they issued him a gun, and he had to pay a $500 deposit for this gun. And he said, "That's a stupid gun. I've got an Uzi. I don't need your stupid gun. I'm not paying $500 for it." And the gun was because they were afraid, according to Lazar, that the Russians were going to kidnap one of them. The Russians had been part of the program and had been kicked out of the program. And Lazar said that they all had guns so that to protect them from the Russians kidnapping them. Because if you know somebody's working on the contract and you can kidnap them and get them out of the country, then you've got somebody who's worked on the program. And that is like intelligence. All the enemies of the United States are trying to figure this out as well. Roosevelt. So I'm going to go through the presidents very quickly, because there's a story that goes around. The presidents didn't know. Garbage. That's what the Illuminati thing. They want you to think the president doesn't know, because then you're going to be down the wrong road for the whole time. So Roosevelt was the first guy that had to handle this thing, and he basically just with the shoot down over L.A. He was talking about who gives the order for the alarm to go off, and it was a UFO over L.A. So he wasn't really that involved. These 2 women told the story. I don't think. Okay, let me play a little bit. These are 2 women in their 80s. They talk about the bodies under the Capitol, and these women are in their 80s. I interviewed them about 10 years ago. They're both now passed away, but their father was taken to the Capitol, and he was shown the bodies and the crafts. So let me play a little bit of this story that they told me about their father telling them about what they saw. This is 1940. This is before 1943. This would have happened.
Hey, Grant.
Yeah.
We can't hear anything. When you shared,
okay, I
did
didn't
you share sound?
Hang on. Let me share again here, and let me do it properly. Share sound. Okay, let me try it again.
So while he was there,
Perfect, thank you.
I'm not sure how they got together, but he and I think it was 3rd or 4th cousin,
something like that,
Yeah.
but related
yeah,
through the Riley family.
yeah, and he got together with him at the state capitol building. That's where Cordell wanted him to be. I don't know if they went to lunch first or if they just met there. And Cordell said that he wanted to show him something. And he said, but you have to swear that you'll never, ever tell anybody. And so Dad did. And so they started down in the building. And finally, my dad said, where are we going anyway? And Cordell said, well, you'll see. And they went down through the regular basement into a sub-basement. And
So it was in the Capitol building.
in the Capitol building. And so anyway, when they got down there, why, there was kind of a long hallway they went through that was lighted, but nothing off to the side in any rooms were lighted. And so when they got to where they were going, why, Cordell opened the door and he reached in and switched on the light, and he said, now this is something really strange that is down here. And there were, I don't recall whether it was 3 or 4, but there was these large jugs that, glass jugs that were on some kind of a stand that had these little people in them. And he said, well, they were like people, but they weren't. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, they had all the same things that we have, but he said, well, it seemed to me like their heads were a little too large for their body, and their eyes were shut, but I think their eyes were bigger than ours. And I said, well, how tall were they? And he said, oh, I don't really know. And I said, well, 6 feet? Oh, no. So we kind of went back and forth on how tall they were, and finally settled on about 4 foot tall. And so then Cordell Hull called his attention to some kind of a machine that he said was a flying machine of some sort. And Dad said, well, it doesn't have wings. And this, of course, was about right around 1935. And
Excuse me, wasn't it wrecked? It wasn't a machine.
yeah, it was in pieces.
A wreck.
And Dad said that there was really, really pretty shiny, like silver, but he said it wasn't anything that he'd ever seen before. So he couldn't say what kind of material it was. And so Cordell said, yeah, but just lift this. And Dad said, that looks heavy. And so Cordell went with his fingers on the edge of it, and it was very lightweight. And so they talked about that.
Yeah, Cordell Hull was the Secretary of State, and we sort of established it wasn't they had a letter from 1935, but we established it was a little bit later. It was probably at least 1939, maybe even as late as 43. So, but these women, why would they tell a bizarre story? So let's go to Roosevelt. This is his air advisor. People say the president is not briefed. Baloney. Truman had an air advisor. His name was Robert Landry. He does an oral history at the Truman Library where I was, and he basically stated that he had been given orders in 1948, February of 1948, to provide a UFO briefing for the President of the United States every 3 months after gathering material from the CIA and other agencies. And later his grandson asked him about Roswell, and he said to his grandson, he promised that before he died he would tell the family about Roswell, but he told his grandson, if you knew what happened at Roswell, nothing in the world would ever be the same again. Truman said this, I can assure you that flying saucers, given that they exist, are not constructed by any power here on Earth. And then I think I got a video of Truman, people say he's not briefed. Here's, I think, Truman talking about UFOs. Oh, this is an interesting one. This is a guy by the name of, he was the biggest broadcaster in the 50s, Frank Edwards. He wrote a couple of books on UFOs. He tells this story about the 1952 overflight of Washington, D.C. and the encounter, this him on the right with Truman. And Eisenhower coming to the president, because as you know, the shoot down order was given in 1952, shoot him down, and a bunch of telegrams went to the White House, which I've recovered, that said, Mr. President, don't shoot him down, don't shoot him down. And according to Frank Edwards, who had 10 million listeners in 1950, 55 or 56 when he told the story, said Eisenhower had gone to the president. He said, Mr. President, anybody who can come across millions of miles of space will know how to protect himself once he gets here. Don't start something you can't finish. And that is according to Frank Edwards from what Einstein told him, that he told the president, don't try to shoot these things down.
They didn't know up with their shoot 'em down order for the simple reason.
I told you.
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military. There's always things like that going on. Flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know, if I'm not mistaken.
So Truman was briefed. Then we go to Dwight Eisenhower. There's not much on Eisenhower. He met with Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold was very, very popular. You saw the first UFO, or the second big UFO sighting was Kenneth Arnold. There was even talk about him running for president. He was a very, very popular guy. Here's him again. This is the story, the 54 story, the nonsense story you'll hear, that the U.S. government, that Eisenhower made an agreement with the Greys in order to abduct people in exchange for technology. Makes no sense whatsoever. Number one, the Greys don't appear till 1961. Number two, if you're the Greys, why would you give them technology which they're going to turn around and try to shoot you down with? And number three is why would the aliens sign a contract or a treaty? What are you going to do if the aliens break the treaty? What are you going to take them to court? Like it makes no sense whatsoever. If you want to know what actually happened in that February 1954 meeting, all you have to do is go a week later, and you will see that there was a test in the Pacific. It was the first test of the Castle Bravo test, and it was the biggest radioactive contamination disaster in the world. They contaminated an entire island. 95% of people on the island got thyroid cancer. They left the people on the island and said, well, let's use this as a nuclear test. Let's see how the natives handle, or how the savages handle radioactivity. And they've paid, I think, $1 billion in reparations for this thing. There was a Russian fishing trawler where everybody ended up dying on it. It was a real disaster. And so if there was a meeting between aliens and Eisenhower, they said, stop the nuclear tests. And Eisenhower told them to get lost. This is the test. Happened about 6 days after that supposed meeting. It was the biggest radioactive contamination test ever done. It was supposed to be 5 megatons. They miscalculated. It was 17 megatons. It was low level, so it was had a lot of contamination. Even the guys 20 miles away, they had to evacuate them off this island under bed sheets. It was just a horrible story. Art Lundahl, this is the story. Art Lundahl was the guy who leaked the story about the channeling the alien at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He was fascinated in UFOs. He was the first guy to run the Weird Desk. So he ran the Weird Desk first with the CIA, paranormal phenomena. The second guy that ran it was Kit Green. Then Ron Pandolfi took over. And he was the guy that gave the briefing to the president in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was the guy who came up with the technology for photographic imagery, where they would take the image from the satellite and you would process it, and you could actually use computers to make a better photograph. He invented that. So he was the guy that went into the president's office and said, here's the Cuban missiles, here's a launcher, here's some stuff. He was the guy, but he was also the guy that supposedly briefed 3 presidents on UFOs. Phobos, one of Eisenhower's main guys, one of his main people believed that Phobos was an artificial satellite, one of his officials. Robert Kennedy, there's always a story about Kennedy himself. Kennedy wasn't interested in UFOs at all. Robert Kennedy, his brother, was very interested. There's a whole collection of letters where he was corresponding back and forth with people. The thing is, he was very skeptical. He said, yes, I'm very interested in the subject, but no, he didn't believe it was actually real, which gives you the sort of the indication that you think they've got this all figured out. You read Robert Kennedy's letters, he's basically saying, yeah, UFOs are real, but no, I really don't believe this whole sort of thing. Lyndon Johnson, as one of the documents I leaked, and I was given a manuscript of this is the manuscript here. It was being written. The guy died before the manuscript was finished. I was given 100 pages of a 300-page manuscript, where they basically are briefing the president of the United States. He was under pressure from a guy by the name of James McDonald, who was the top researcher at the time. He was friends with the president, and then he said, okay, you do this report, and shut the guy up. So they did this report. They had very high level people, and the result of the report was, this is the guy that ran it, and this is passes and stuff like that. And here's the guys that ran it. You have Art Lundahl, that guy that I had for the President Kennedy. You have Secretary of the Air Force, retired. You have nuclear physicist. You have all these high-level people, almost the same level people. Kelly Johnson, who ran Lockheed Skunk Works. All the same people that Tom DeLonge had. It was almost the same category that Tom DeLonge just had the later versions of these characters. And basically, the conclusion they came to, the abundant evidence suggests that flying saucers, our crafts, are real. They have intelligence. They are all, often observed with highly reflective metal-looking outer skin surfaces. And basically, it was basically, yeah, exactly what the government is telling you today. Yes, UFOs exist. We do not believe they're extraterrestrial, and that's all we know. We just know this thing's for real, and we don't have any answers. That, I think, is the bottom line to this thing. They really do not have any answers. I'll show you some of the people that talked about this. Jackie Gleason was interested. This is a story that he took. He was taken to see bodies in Florida with President Nixon. That Nixon was very involved, and Nixon actually, with the Holloman Air Force Base film, Bob Emenegger, I didn't get the letter before he died. Linda Howe claimed she saw the letter with another researcher, and she's got a photographic memory. And she said the letter said, it was a signed letter from President Nixon, who said to the producer, Bob Emenegger, but the Holloman Air Force Base film said, thank you for your cooperation on the project we worked on. And it was the idea that Nixon had actually authorized the leaking of this story, that there had been an encounter at Holloman Air Force Base between us and the entities. And Gleason was friends with all the presidents. He had a lot of power. And he was, according to his second wife, we interviewed her, said that he actually was showing bodies. She said he was either fooling around with a woman or he saw the bodies. He was pretty shaken up when he came home. So here's them. Here's the girl that told us. Beverly McKittrick was the one that we interviewed. And we found out that at Homestead Air Force Base, where this event supposedly took place, Nixon had the Southern White House. He had made 92 trips at 293 days at the Southern White House. And every time he flew down there, 92 trips, he'd stop at Holloman Air Force Base, and that's where the bodies were. This is the story. It's in past, present, future. Confirmed. Ford confirmed Holloman. This is Ford. This is a story that Eric Davis phoned. These people were after the Holloman Air Force Base story. They knew that the story is probably true. They had heard rumors that generals had been flown in and stuff. They were asking me about what I knew about it, because I knew Bob Emenegger. And Ford was phoned by Eric Davis, the physicist, and Ford said, yes, he saw this in a briefing. He was showing a 15-minute color film. This is the Holloman landing. And Davis asked him, well, when was the briefing? Ford said, I'm never going to tell you when the briefing is. Don't even go there. And then he phoned up Bush, and Bush told him, yes. He said, was it a psychological film? No. Was it a training film? No. Was it an A-12 flaming out? No. I went through all the things, and he said it was the real deal, and it had massive security around it, where this UFO lands at Holloman Air Force Base. So there's two presidents who've actually confirmed this. And then there was the story that Jimmy Carter, there was one of his Secret Service agents, actually made claims that he was in the briefing when they showed the 15-minute color film. But then when researchers started to go after him, he started to deny, no, I wasn't in there, and he denied the whole thing. This is Holloman Air Force Base. Jimmy Carter, everybody says Jimmy Carter didn't do anything. Not true. Jimmy Carter just didn't have his fingerprints on it. He had his press secretary going after the FBI. He had a lawyer at the CIA forcing the documents. Half of all the FOI documents on UFOs that have ever been released were all released under the administration of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter forced a lot of documents out. You just never saw it. He tried to force a new study done by NASA, and they came back and said, you cut our budget. We don't have the money. If you have got metal, we're willing to look at metal, but we don't have the resources to run another Blue Book study. They knew it was a PR nightmare. Don't get us involved in this thing. So Jimmy Carter, yes, Jimmy Carter absolutely knew. And he actually stated, maybe I've got it here, because he had the UFO sighting. He actually stated, he was asked by James Fox, and this is the thing. He said, why didn't you do something when you were there? And he said, there are many possibilities. but nobody has answers. That's the thing. Yes, it's real, but we don't have any answers. We know this is real, but it's beyond us. And as Sebivan said, because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what you're dealing with. Doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. Just means you got bodies and crafts. Supposedly Bush told Jimmy Carter in his presidential elect briefing, he asked about UFOs, and he said, "Curiosity is not sufficient need to know. If you want those records, you go to the House Science and Technology Committee." So a lot of people say, well, he was refused the stuff. Not true. Everybody knows now the House Science and Technology Committee would not have the Roswell files. What he was asking for was the files that he promised for the American people. He said, "I will release everything except for the classified material," and he asked for those files. Those files might have been at the Science and Technology Committee. The Science and Technology Committee are people flying around at 2,000 feet. They ain't got the records. So Jimmy Carter was refused not all the UFO files, but the files that he wanted to release to the American people. He did the SRI study, he did a NASA study. Joey Powell went to the FBI. Sheehan talked about a study that was done by the Library of Congress for the president, and Jimmy Carter had a sighting. This is the mail. He got apparently 10,000 letters. A lot of these have been recovered. People saying, "You promised you were going to do something." This is some of the mail. This is one of the mail bags of all the UFO stuff that's coming into the White House. Jimmy Carter had a second sighting. Everybody knows about his one. This is another one that was filmed. This is actually in the archives. The actual photographs in the archives. This happened in Panama, and that's the presidential Army One helicopter taking off. And one of the people, not press people, it was one of the people in the administration actually took this photograph of a UFO following the Army One helicopter. Reagan had two sightings. He was behind UFO Cover Up Live, which is a documentary you should watch. This is where the idea of the live alien comes from, and the Area 51 thing. Reagan, this is 2 weeks before Reagan left the office, and the story was that Reagan, this was his goodbye gift to the American people, was to reveal UFO material. And that's the way they reveal it. They put it into the stuff surrounded by disinformation, put it out in fictional Hollywood type stuff, and release the story, but keep the classified information. He had 2 UFO sightings and was very open about it. And Shirley MacLaine actually tells the story that Lucille Ball, the comedian, had actually said that in the one encounter that happened in California, he was coming down the coast from Sacramento into Los Angeles for a cocktail party, that Nancy and him were an hour late, and that they actually stated that that the UFO, there was actually an alien encounter, and the alien had told Ronald Reagan to run for president. And Lucille Ball writes it in her biography. She said, I always wondered if people knew that story, whether they'd voted for Ronald Reagan. Reagan was fascinated in everything paranormal. Here's Steven Spielberg takes E.T. the Extraterrestrial 1982 to the White House, and Reagan stands up at the end and he says, "Thank you, Stephen, for bringing E.T. the Extraterrestrial to the White House. And I want to let you know there probably aren't 6 people in this whole room who know how true this whole thing is." And I checked it. We found it was 39 people. There was the ambassador from Great Britain. CIA director was there. George Bush was there. And he said there are probably 6 people in this room who know this whole thing. The ET story is real.
And he just stood up and he looked around the room, almost like he was doing a head count. And he said, "I want to thank you for bringing ET to the White House. We really enjoyed your movie." And then he looked around the room and he said, "And there are a number of people in this room who know that everything on that screen is absolutely true." And he said it without smiling. But he said that, and everybody laughed. By the way, the whole room laughed because he presented it like a joke, but he wasn't smiling as he said it.
Bush was caught on tape by a friend of mine who's now since passed, and he said on tape, it's very hard to hear, but he said, "I know a lot." He said, "I know some, I know a lot." When he was asked, "Why didn't you declassify the UFO stuff?" And then there's a story to Jimmy Carter where he's the CIA director briefing the incoming president, and he has this whole thing about if you want the UFO files, you got to go to the House Science and Technology Committee. Dan Quayle, this is something I'm one of the few people who has. Here's Dan Quayle. You think, well, the president isn't briefed. Here's Dan Quayle, the vice president for Bush, talking about the fact that, yeah, they were briefed.
The alien situation is very interesting because we had the same issue. I mean, there are people out there that really believe that there are these aliens. And we literally spent some time looking at this, but there was nothing conclusive that came of it.
Again, the story, nothing conclusive came of it. So they looked at it. Yes, it's real, but beyond that, where they're coming from, what their intention is, all this kind of stuff, that stuff is missing. Clinton has one of the biggest UFO files. They're online. I put all the files. I didn't even read them. There's thousands of pages. He was very interested. There was a lot of stuff on him. He apparently had a sighting. I was told by the one of the people at the Clinton Library that that Bill and Hillary had a sighting in Arkansas when they were young at this barbecue restaurant they used to hang out with. Then there's the Rockefeller Initiative, where I recovered the document we see Rockefeller and Hillary, and this is where Rockefeller is trying to get the briefing. He's trying to give the president a briefing, and the idea is the president, as he told Rockefeller, Clinton told Rockefeller, this is like the Arkansas tar baby story. If you know the story of Brer Rabbit catching Brer Rabbit. The whole idea that you set up the tar baby and Brer Rabbit gets mad, he punches the tar baby because he won't say hello, and they get stuck to the tar baby, and then he punches his other hand, and then he kicks him with his feet. It's like the Arkansas tar baby. You can't touch the story. That's what Clinton apparently told Rockefeller. This is a story, if you're the president, you can't touch this. You're going to get stuck to it. You can't get it off. He confirmed that he played both sides. He said, well, I really know what's going on. And then he said, I requested the Roswell files, and I can tell you it wasn't really a crash at Roswell. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I didn't know what was going on, and then say, I got the Roswell files. He basically is trying to distance himself from the story. Dick Cheney, that's my 15 seconds of fame. I actually asked Dick Cheney, and he gives the same question. Maybe I've got it here. No, the audio is missing. So anyway, I asked him because he was chief of staff for Ford. He was Secretary of Defense under Bush, and he was the vice president when I talked to him. This is April the 11th, just after they came into power. And I said to him, Mr. Cheney, in all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed on the subject of UFOs? If so, what was it, and what were you told? When was it, and what were you told? He said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified, and I wouldn't be talking about it. I went, hallelujah, that's exactly what you're supposed to say. That's the whole deal. If I've been briefed on it, you're at a 2,000-foot level or on the ground, you don't have a need to know. I'm not telling you. If I'd been briefed, it would probably be classified. I recovered the 1,000 pages of documents. This is the Clinton Initiative documents. This is the correspondence going from Rockefeller to the science advisor to the president, going back and forth. And you wonder, they did a study of Roswell twice in the 1990s. It wasn't because the U.S. Air Force had nothing better to do. It was because Rockefeller kept threatening the president. And he said, I'm going to the president. That's it. I've had it with you guys. I'm going to the president. I want disclosure. And Bud Hopkins told me, he said, Mr. Rockefeller, I don't think that's how it works. He said, I don't care. I'm going to the president. I'm going to get this thing disclosed. And so they were always afraid that he was going to go to the president. So they'd say, Mr. Rockefeller, what do you want? And he said, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to put a full page ad in every major newspaper in the United States. And it's going to say, Mr. President, what do you know? When did you learn it? Why are you not telling the people? And they were so petrified. So they said, what do you need? They said, if it's deep as classified as you say it is, and if it's as wide as you say it is, I mean, we can't do it. Give us one case. We'll declassify the one case, and then we'll go after the rest. He said, okay, Roswell. That's why the U.S. Air Force did a study on Roswell. That's when they came up with the whole thing about it was the mogul balloon. Then Clinton was in Belfast, Northern Ireland in 1995, and he's lighting the Christmas tree, and he makes this statement across the bow. He says, if the U.S. Air Force did recover bodies, they didn't tell me about it, and I want to know, which means your report in 1994 didn't talk about the bodies. So explain the bodies. So they do another study, which cost $20 million in 1997, and that's when they come up with the crash test dummy story. And that's, hey, Mr. President, it was crash test dummies in 1953. And then the president was handcuffed. What else could he do? So that was why they did 2 UFO studies on Roswell. It was because the president was forcing them to do these studies. And then this is one that you see Hillary Clinton. There's 2 documents on Hillary Clinton here, and it first took me years to figure out this. It said this is Jack Big Gibbons, who's the science advisor to the president, and this is a letter to from Rockefeller's lawyer. It said attached to our draft letter to the president, which Lawrence has been discussing with Mrs. Clinton and her staff. The draft report of the best evidence about UFOs. And I'm thinking, like, why would they be talking to Mrs. Clinton? And the idea was the tar baby story. The president can't touch the story. So they tell Hillary Clinton what's going on. And then she goes to the president at night and says, oh, Rockefeller said this, Gibbons said that. What do you want to do? And then the president's giving directions. So it's indirect. She's not in the government. So that's how they got the message back and forth. And the other thing they have is this is the second document where they talk about the fact that the Hillary Clinton's office, for all these 1,000 pages of documents that I just showed you, all of them are going through Hillary Clinton's office. And I couldn't figure out why all these documents are going through Hillary Clinton's office. She was the post office, and that was the whole deal. She was running interference. She was the one that was taking messages to the president, because you can't go in the president's office and contaminate him, because once the president knows, then he starts asking, people start asking questions, and one question leads to another question, which leads to another, and next thing you got 10 million questions, and the president doesn't know. He doesn't have the answer, and he's supposed to be the powerful guy that's protecting the United States of America, and you don't want him standing there going, oh, well, I don't know. It's like, you got to keep it away from the president. So you say there's an Illuminati, and the president doesn't know what's going on, and everybody chases the Illuminati, and the president walks away and doesn't have to take any questions on UFOs. Obama was big on goofing around with the thing. He loved the subject. He would drop hints and stuff like that. Here's him with Macy. He was a 6-year-old girl who was an expert on presidents. She knew everything about every president. And of course, they said, "Do you have one question for the president?" She said, "Yeah. Are there aliens?" And he said, "Well, what do you think?" That's the thing. You answer a question with a question. And she said, "Yeah, I think so." And then he said, "Well, how do you know that?" She says, "Because it was on Americans Most Secret, or some show like that." And he said, "Well, there you go." And he said, "Well," he said, "we haven't made contact yet, but if we do contact the aliens, you're the first person I'll let know." So Obama was always goofing around with people and dropping these little hints and stuff like that. And when Podesta went into the White House, the day after he went in there, Obama made the statement about Area 51. He said, "I'm probably the first president that's ever mentioned the word Area 51. People always wanted to know what's going on in 51. When I wanted to know, I asked Shirley MacLaine." He's giving an award to Shirley MacLaine. So he drops this thing, and immediately, as soon as he mentions Area 51 is declassified, and everybody now knows there's Area 51. So he was playing this. He was asked by Kimmel. Kimmel asks everybody, and you'll see all these people dodging the question, and it confirms that, yeah, they know, because Kimmel always says, did you get briefed? Here's Jim Semivan. Let's skip that. Obama commercial. I don't think I got the commercial. No. So this commercial where he does this commercial for Kimmel, and is for giving money for some charity or something like that. And he's doing this sort of thing. He says, "If you send in so much money, I'll release the UFO files." And then some guy in the background says, "You can't, that's classified." And he says, "Well, you're right in here in my drawer." So he liked to play the game with the UFO thing. But when he actually came down, he said, I think I've got it here. Here's when he was asked, when he was running for president, would you declassify? And he said, "Well, it depends." Or would you, he said, "It depends whether the aliens are Democrats or Republicans." So he sort of walks around the question. But at that point, he said, "I'm more interested in people that need help here. There may be aliens coming, but I've got other concerns." Here's where he declassifies the Area 51. Shirley MacLaine is getting an award. That's when he does it. He knows as soon as he drops the word Area 51, and that was the day after Podesta went to be his advisor. It was almost like a gift to Podesta to declassify Area 51, because Podesta used to actually go to watch X-Files. He actually phoned Area 51 at one time to find out if there was UFOs at Area 51. So when he gave there, Obama gave him this gift of declassifying Area 51. This is, he makes joke. He's at Roswell. Roswell used to be a swing state, and everybody would go to Roswell 2 days before the election, try to get the votes from New Mexico, and they'd always make these UFO jokes in Roswell. Here's one that you're going to find later. I get in the Chris Bledsoe. I talk about the fact that the experiencers are the ones that know. Chris Bledsoe in North Carolina is a top experiencer. All these military people were coming. They actually found out that he had been in contact with a lady, which was very interesting to the military people, and they actually get him to describe, what did the lady tell you? And he put it out, and they actually went to Obama, and he was briefed. Here's Hillary Clinton saying she's going to do the declassification, and she was. I was told at the time that she was going to do the declassification thing, and then she lost the election. And I went to Chris Bledsoe and I said, okay, so what's going to happen now? And he said that the green light is still on. They're going to do it. And that's when Tom DeLonge had the delay. They had these high-level guys that were going to do the disclosure, and because Hillary lost the election, it was about 11 months later when finally Tom DeLonge got Lou Elizondo and a bunch of new guys and went on and started talking about this declassification. It was supposed to have happened in 2016. They were going to do this 7-year plan, and they were going to disclose everything. And Hillary Clinton was going to run this whole thing. And she tells that to Kimmel. She says, "I don't care if my husband didn't get anything. I'm going to figure out the Area 51 thing." She actually announces that she's going to do it. Here's her at the Rockefeller Ranch, and she's given this book on UFO, the implications of UFO disclosure, of finding out there's extraterrestrials. And this is when the briefing takes place. And then what happens is that when the briefing takes place, Rockefeller has the president away from the Washington, and the briefing is going to take place. And what happens is when the briefing takes place, only Hillary Clinton shows up. Bill does not show up at the briefing. This is the whole idea. It's a tar baby story. He can't be involved. And the morning after, according to Whitley Strieber, Hillary Clinton said to Rockefeller, "Okay, we've heard your story. Now don't ever bring up UFOs again." And that was the end of Rockefeller's initiative to try to get UFO disclosure. Rance Priebus. This is Trump. I mean, I was actually brought in because I was the presidential guy. I was actually brought in by one of Trump's major fundraisers, and he said, "They're not going to tell him. We're doing a briefing for Rance Priebus, and where are the crafts?" I said, "I have no idea where the crafts are." I said, "What do you mean they're not going to tell him?" He said, "Well, they're not going to tell him." So, "Well, who's the they?" He said, "Well, the guys that are running it." I said, "What do you mean?" If Trump gets in, Trump had won the election. I said, "Okay." So he appoints the CI director. He appoints the director of national intelligence. He appoints the head of NSA. He appoints the deputies, the undersecretary at the defense. He had 6 secretary of defense. He was firing people left, right, and center. The deputies at all the 6 deputies at the Defense Department, he nominates all these. The president puts them all in. So if they don't tell him, then who's to blame? I mean, he's putting all the people in. He can fire anybody he wants. He can go down as far as he wants and fire all the people if he wants to get the truth. And then he said, "Well, yeah, that makes sense." And so I don't know if they actually gave the briefing to Rance Priebus, but when Hillary was talking in 2016, she was going to declassify. The New York Times went to Donald Trump and they said, "Hillary's talking about declassifying. What do you got to say to that?" And he said, "Well, I assume you're talking about outer space." And she said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, I'm not interested." And that's so he'd been contacted, and there was a guy who was going to do disclosure. He was yelling at Trump as he was on the campaign trail in 2016 and saying declassify it, and Trump just ignored him, walked by. He has no interest in UFOs whatsoever. Biden, this is 2007. I may skip the audio because it's not that good. Basically, there's a presidential debate taking place in Philadelphia in 2007 where the guy is asked a question about UFOs, the Ohio congressman. Anyway, and he saw this UFO over the swimming pool at Shirley McLean's house and heard this voice and stuff. And then they asked him in the presidential debate, "Did you actually have this sighting?" And he basically says, "Well, no, yeah, I had the sighting, but I didn't hear any voices and stuff like that." And after that, then they asked all these people, "What do you think? What do you think? What do you think about UFOs?" And Biden says, "What are you, crazy? Where are we going? No, I don't believe in UFOs." And that was 2007. He said he didn't believe in UFOs. But this is, well, I'm gonna skip it. Kamala Harris was asked by Kimmel. He said, "Okay, you got briefed. Okay, so as vice president, there's all these interesting things like Jimmy Hoffa and who killed Kennedy and UFOs." And she said, "Yeah, I'm interested in those subjects." And he said, "Okay, so did you get the documents? Did you look in the documents?" And she said, "That's all I'm going to tell you." And this is the same thing as Cheney. She's basically saying, "That's all I'm going to say." She's confirming, yes, she got the briefing, and I'm not telling you anything because it's a 60,000-foot briefing. We're not telling you on your talk show. So she was briefed. Here's the latest briefing of Trump. This happened in June. He talks about the fact that it's all very interesting. He talked to his pilots. They're fantastic guys. It's all very interesting. And he said, "Yes, I was briefed. I won't talk to you about what I was told about, but it's very interesting. Am I a believer? No, I can't say that I am." So he was showing the Nimitz film, he talked to the video, the guys, the aircraft guys, and basically said, "I still don't believe in UFOs." Mike Pence was briefed. He said, "Yes, I was briefed. Let me say, it doesn't exist. UFOs don't exist. I have been to Area 51, and I didn't meet anyone there that wasn't from around here." So all of them are briefed. No matter what anybody tells you, I say they're all briefed. Now, they may not listen, they may not believe it or whatever. And the more they want to know, the expression is, if the president wants something, they will move a mountain to get the president whatever he demands. This is one of the reasons why they don't release it. This is Apollo 16 astronaut Charles Duke. And this is the thing. So you say the president stands up. The president stands up and says, yeah, UFOs are real and we're working on this thing. And then Charles Duke stands up and he said, I don't believe in alien life. God showed me a specific answer to 2 prayers, that they're demonic and they're demonic beings that will make an appearance. They will appear to be real. They are real. The Bible says angel Satan will appear as an angel of light, so they can appear. Nothing human can make a 90-degree turn at 3,000 miles an hour. I think the purpose is to draw you away from the real God and say, look at us. So what you're going to do is you're going to have the president stand up and say, oh, UFOs are real and we're working on it. And then some powerful person on a radio talk show or a podcast is going to say it's demons and they're eating the dogs and cats. Your move, Mr. President. What are you going to do now? And that's what Jim Semivan says. If you make this move, make sure you got a backup plan for what's going to happen. Because if the thing starts going south, you're in a lot of trouble because you've spilt the milk and you can't get it back in the jar. Here's Jesse Marcel Jr. talking about the fact that he was told by a guy who worked for the Senate is complaining. We don't have access. We don't know. He tells the story about Dick D'Amato, and I'll skip the video here, but he tells the story at the citizens' hearing that Dick D'Amato came to him and he said, I want to talk to you about Roswell. He said, I've told everything I know about Roswell. He said, no, maybe I want to tell you. And where he takes him is where those 2 women, those old women, to the sub-basement of the Capitol. It's the same place. Now there's a big conference room there. He said he was taken into the conference room by a guy named Dick D'Amato. Dick D'Amato was doing an audit for the Appropriations Committee. So the Senate argument now is that we have authorization. If the executive branch spends money, we have the power to oversee the spending. And they didn't tell us. So what happens is when the Lazar story breaks in 1989, they're talking about Area 51, and Senator Byrd, who runs the Senate Appropriations Committee, says, we hand out the money. We're the Appropriations Committee. What, are we doing UFOs at Area 51? Are we back in engineering flying saucers? And everybody on the committee goes, I don't know, sir. I don't know. Well, he said, well, damn well, we're going to find out. And they send Dick D'Amato to Area 51. And in this upcoming book, I'll tell this whole story about what Dick D'Amato did, who he talked to and stuff like that. And Dick D'Amato goes back to Jesse Marcel, and he's got the book Majestic on the table. And he says to Jesse, he says, you know what, I just want to tell you, Jesse, this is for real. This ain't fiction. And he's tapping the book, this Majestic book about how they handled Roswell. And he said, well, I know that. Well, so when are you gonna tell the people? And then Dick D'Amato, who's the auditor for the Appropriations Committee, so he would have told this all to the Appropriations Committee. Appropriations Committee knew, because he told him, he said, if it were up to me, I would have done it yesterday. It's not up to me. I'm just here to find out how much the security is costing. There's a deep part of government, they're unelected, and they've got all the money and they've got all the power. And then when he talked to Stephen Greer, he said to Stephen Greer, he said, I just want to let you know, you're up against the what do you call it? The varsity team of all black budget programs. So it's a black budget program. They know it's a black budget program. It's been authorized. It's been given money, and they're moving the money around. But he said, be careful and good luck. That's what Stephen Greer. This is the book Majestic that he said. This is the real deal. Years ago, this is the first time you could find that on the internet. This is this idea. Because we cannot track the phenomena, we track the people correlated with the phenomena. This is what Obama said when he talked about being briefed. Actually, I'm being very serious here. There is footage and records of objects in the sky that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they move their trajectory. He said they did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so I think that people still take seriously trying to find out and investigate what it is. Here's Brennan, the senior director for Obama. I must tell you, he agrees. Yes, I've seen the videos from the Navy pilots. I must tell you that they're quite eyebrow raising. Who knows what these things might be? They're all saying the same thing. They're saying, yeah, this is for real, but beyond that, we really don't. This is, who's this? Jim Semivan. I know for sure. I will tell you, my educated guess is that they have some information, but I will bet a year's pension paycheck that they are completely in the dark about what it is. I think this whole UAP phenomena is well beyond us. And here's a guy that had 3 briefings, and the one briefing was like 6 hours in the CIA by people he said that had as many clearances. And Jim Semivan is the equivalent of a 2-star general in the CIA. He's a very high-level guy inside the CIA. And he basically said, yeah, he said, it's for real, but we really beyond that, we really don't know. Here's him talking about what do you do if you're the president? Most of the people who grasped what I actually meant, it was immaterial. We're basically an illusion. This is this whole idea. If you suddenly realize that time and space don't exist, and that atoms are basically invisible, and that we're just energy forms, think about this for a second. Is that the case you want the president to make and describe that? How would a president go on national TV? And I am sure they have thought about ways to do this. They never came to an agreement. They have always come to the agreement that it's probably best not to say anything till we have a better understanding. What the hell do you say? So how do you say to the people, this is Maya, this is an illusion, there is no time, there's no space, everything, the physical doesn't exist. And where are you going to go with that? I mean, you're going to drop it on people who have you and I have studied this phenomenon. We're not going to be shocked, but a lot of people are just going to go like, what are you talking about? There's no, the heaven is gone, and it's like these aliens are coming out of some other dimension and stuff like that. You're just going to blow people away. And so they say, until we understand what's going on, it's better not to say anything. And then he talks about this experience with the helicopter. He had an experience with a helicopter just before. The basic story is that the basic story is this. There is another intelligence. We met them. This is the Holloman Air Force Base. We met them. There was a meeting at Holloman Air Force Base. We don't know much about them. We have craft. They are located here. And he mentions, we know where they're located. We know some of the organizations working on them. This is the main organization. These are the defense contractors working about it. That's as far as it goes. That's as far as he knows. And beyond that, it's something that they really fully don't understand. Hal Puthoff is one of the key guys. They had a meeting at the Arlington Institute with all guys, and you would say, we should have disclosure. So Hal Puthoff tells about this meeting. They had all these high-level people like Hal Puthoff and who else, Kit Green, I don't know who else showed up there, all these people. And when they went in there, said, yeah, we should have disclosure. And after 2 days, they all decided, no, they changed their mind. No, they looked at all the things that could happen, all the scenarios, and basically decided, no, it'd be better not to do disclosure at this time. And these are guys, Hal Puthoff's 88 years old. He's worked on this his whole life. This is his life to try to figure this thing out. And he decided, no, it's better not to put this thing out. Jim Semivan, here's some stuff Jimmy Semivan said. He's one of the guys I sort of listen to. It comes close, it teases us, it cajoles us, it lies to us, but you can never take it home to meet the parents. It won't allow you to do that. And that's my thing I call the theory of wow. They're just doing this weird stuff, but they're never going to land and tell you what's going on. That's not what they're doing. They're not gonna, that's what we do. We go into another country, we say, we're here to bring freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. And they point guns and say, get the hell out of our country. Who do you think you are? That's not what they're doing. They're making us to force us to do it. So they do all these little things that make you think about it, but they're never going to give you the answer. That's not what the aliens or whatever they are doing. You can see this idea that this is a seance that took place with Martin Luther, and they asked him the same question, except they talked about God. Instead of why doesn't UFOs land on the White House lawn, they said, why doesn't God get off his fat ass and come down here and tell us what's going on? And Martin Luther said, because doubt is the instrument which forges the human spirit. If the day were to come when the human spirit no longer doubted, the human soul would fly off and leave the body behind, because it would have forged wings would lie fallow. God is the sower and man is the harvester. The celestial seed demands that the plowshare remain in the furrow of life. So they're forcing us to figure this thing out. They're never going to give us the answer. Simivan says, I've met people who are in the know. One of them told me the truth is indigestible. How do you give it to people? It's indigestible. People are not going to be able to grasp this thing. It is not something that can be fully grasped or entertained. It would be like telling somebody about something that they can't do anything about. It is world changing and transformational. And that's one of the big fear they have, is that they really don't have the answers, and they're just going to blow people away by saying it has no engine. It has, we don't know where it's from. We don't know if it's aliens and this kind of stuff. There does not appear to be any out there. I say this all the time. What did Jim Semivan mean when he says, there does not appear to be any out there. If you're going to go to people, Jim Semivan points out that half the people in the United States are reading at a grade 6 level. 2/3 of people in the United States cannot find Miami, Florida on a map. And you're going to go and tell them there's no out there, that this is all illusion. This is where this phenomena is going. It's becoming less physical and more this idea about multidimensional and how does reality actually work and stuff like that. He said, I don't think it's a threat. So you have this whole thing on Congress is that they're doing the threat scenario. And the idea is the threat scenario is you want to scare the living daylights out of Congress. Semivan says, no, I don't think it's a threat at all. I think it's just totally indifferent to who the hell we are, but nevertheless, it has to be looked at. So what they're doing is if you go to Congress and say, oh, we're interested in UFOs, they're going to go, get the heck out of here and don't let the door hit you on the way out. But if you go and say they're eating the dogs and cats and they're pedophiles and they're interfering with our nuclear weapons and they're doing this, then the Congress go, oh my God, how much money do you want? And they walk away with money. You're selling it with the threat. That's why they're doing the threat scenario. And I know that because Lou Elizondo and Mellon, I was part of the negotiations with people in the Canadian government, and the Canadian government wouldn't do it, and they walked away. They want us to do the threat scenario, and the Canadians said, no, we're going to do a scientific investigation. They said, that's the poison pill, we're gone, and they walked away. I don't know how much more I should do here. The program is legal. This is where I say the program that oversees all of this, I'm sure was legal. It's my belief that the program was owned by the executive branch. The executive branch does not have to tell Congress what it is doing. It was constructed in the late 40s or early 50s under an executive action document. So people can say, well, I want to know where they're going to take the president. I want to know who's when there's a nuclear attack. I want to know what the targets are. I want to know what all the spies are in Russia. And it's like, no, you don't need to know that. This is the whole deal, is that they have built this program over 80 years. And Semivan, who's got the briefings and has worked this, says he's absolutely sure this is legal and that there's going to be a legal fight between Congress and the congressional branch over who owns this project. He said the problem right now is that Congress does not own the program. It's run out of the executive branch under one of these executive emergency action documents, and the president just said this is the way it is, it's very hard to change it unless you go to court, and he figures there's going to be a court fight down the road. I don't expect anything from the government to come out on this. The government exists solely for the defense of the United States. It's not the UFO director. That's not their deal, which is what I say to people. If you want disclosure, go and get it. It's not up to the government to give you disclosure. Disclosure is going to be found by talking to experiencers. They'll tell you what the beings are telling. There's all sorts of patterns that clearly tell you. I wrote a book called UFO Skypods, 35 people who flew the craft. I tell you how the craft is flown. I tell you how the thing actually operates. They all say the same thing. If you go to the experiences, you can start to understand this. It's not up to the government to hand us the answer. We can figure it out for ourselves, and instead of waiting for the government to do it, because they're interested in weapons, they're interested in technology, and that's not what this whole thing is about. He talks about the dots. I think there's a way that we can sort of locate some dots to later on to connect. Right now, you can say we have dots. I'm not even sure we have dots because I'm not sure the dots are actually real. That's where we're at. This is a guy that got the briefings, and that's what he's saying. It's not real the way you think it is. It's got this weird component. Even Lakatsky said we were inside the craft, and people say they're not briefed. If you listen to Lakatsky's interview, he said, I was in a congressional facility. That means Congress. He was in a congressional facility, and there was a congressman. We've identified the congressman as Senator Reid. Senator Reid was there, and the meeting, it was a long meeting, and it talked about the fact that they had an intact craft, and they'd gotten inside the craft. And Lakatsky said, we were inside the craft, and there was no engine. And then he said, so what are we really dealing with here? If it doesn't have an engine, what's really going on here? And then they asked him what was inside the craft. And he said, if I told you that, I have to get it cleared. If I were to tell you that, the rest of the book would be primitive. That's what they're saying. This is so far, this is this idea that the craft is on the outside, it's 30 feet on the outside, and you go inside, it's the size of a football stadium. This is the kind of stuff that they're going to have to disclose, where people are going to go like, are you kidding me? It's just going to blow people away. So they're doing this gradual leaking of this material and hoping that they can figure out this stuff. But right now, according to people like Semivan, and this is Ron Pandolfi, it's all loons, crooks, and worse. They really don't know. Here's Ryan Bledsoe talking, and this is, I had the honor of talking to this guy by the name of Tim Taylor, who's the big NASA guy, who's Black Ops guy. I talked to him, and then he talked to Ryan Bledsoe, and here Semivan tells him it's an ultra-terrestrial phenomenon. So this is this idea, it may not be extraterrestrial, it created us, it was here before us, and it communicates with us through symbols. So that you got to be prepared that if suddenly this thing makes itself known and it says we've been here forever. This is our airspace. Get your planes out of our airspace. We're going to give the military 24 hours to get their planes out of the airspace. You're interfering with our flight traffic, and you got 48 hours to get the airline traffic out of our airspace. We own the airspace, and we will shoot anything down. We're going to do a shoot down order like Truman order in 1952. Anything that flies, we will shoot it down. So if that happens, if you have disclosure and that happens, if you're the president, what do you do now? I mean, you gotta, that's where Jim Semivan says, be careful what you wish for. You may actually get it. You gotta be sure you've got a backup plan for what actually could happen as this thing unfolds. Kid Green is one of the Weird Desk guys that ran the Weird Desk. He doesn't even believe it's UFO technology. He believes a lot of it is black ops technology, people being injured, stuff like that. I think I'll skip some of this because we're sort of ready. Lukatsky is the other guy I think you should listen to. Lukatsky's the guy that ran the OSAP program. He's the guy, had the experience. He wrote this book inside the U.S. government covert program, and he's writing a third book, which we'll talk about what was the inside of the craft like and stuff. But he said, you got to realize they're watching. The enemy is watching. Whatever I say, whatever I release to you about what's inside that craft, the Soviets and the Chinese are working on it as well, and you may just give them the piece that they're looking for. Do you think the American public needs to know about the ultimate reality of the fact that there appears to be a non-human intelligence flying airspace or something like that? He said that's why we're writing the books. The public has the right to know, question mark. Within the security limits, security comes first. And what he said, this is where he talks about the senator being there, but he basically says, hang on, I want to get the, he talks about the fact that they've met men in black. The men in black are real. Now, this is a guy that ran the program. And he also said the other thing that's going to blow people away, even UFO people. He said, the database has 200,000 sightings. And he said, it's like driving down a street. Every single one was different. That changes everything. If suddenly every UFO is different, and that's what I found with the propulsion system. Everybody said the same thing. The craft is alive. The craft is conscious. You think in your mind where you want to go. It's within you, and then you touch something. But everybody touched something different, and that's the whole thing. It's like this idea like everything's happening different. That everybody's seeing something different, and this is the whole thing. You're gonna have to tell this story that it has this different sort of thing that it's not what you think it is. That's the Men in Black stuff. And he talks about the fact that he believes that it's positive. Like here he says, I'm influenced by my Catholic faith. I'm optimistic. I think everything heads towards good. So you have this idea that this is gonna be bad, the aliens are bad guys. And here's the guy that ran the program, and he said, no, I think it's heading towards good. This fear thing is he says it's not. He said, and this is the old idea about you don't know what's going on. I'm going to be long gone. And Colm Kelleher will probably be long gone, and you'll be long gone, and they'll still be exploring this and still not have the answers. Everybody thinks there's all these pieces of the puzzle. The government's got the last piece. We put it in here. We're going to be drying flying saucers, and we're going to be going to Mars, and we're going to free energy and stuff like that. And no, they're saying we don't have any answers. And the other thing, and I'll just maybe if there's a question or two, but the other thing that I'll bring up that you got to look at if you're going to release this thing is, are you going to allow these people? So the Greys are announced themselves, they're real, and they're going to emigrate into the United States of America. So you have Tesla, which has in Fremont, California, has a factory, produces 665,000 Teslas a year. They pay people $20 an hour on the assembly line. The aliens come down and say, okay, we're going to open a factory right beside Tesla. How much do the aliens make? They make zero. They don't make any money at all. They can build a factory in 3 days, and they're going to go up against Tesla and GM and Ford, and they're going to build crafts for $3,000 that don't have any engine, that have no, you don't need a battery, you don't need gas. Are you going to allow them to come in and compete? Or are you just expect that somehow the aliens are going to drop the technology and go home? That ain't happening. There's all sorts of things that if you're the government, you have to take a look at all the potentials of all the things that could happen. This disclosure thing is much more important. And again, it still comes down to the fact, and that's what I'm going to write in this book, the whole idea that if you go to the experiencers, they'll actually tell you. In fact, I often ask experiencers, hey, did you ever ask the guy if he was an alien? Nobody has ever said yes. A number of them have asked. And the one guy, for example, said, no, that would not best describe who I actually am. I'm an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the creator. He said, why do you come as this gray looking thing? And he said, well, because it's a functional body. It's easier to create than the human body. And one other guy in Israel said, they told me when we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't need a body. We can take on whatever body we want. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. And that's the whole thing. It may not even be alien. If you ask the aliens, and I've never had one say that they were, they'll say, you don't understand. So if you're from Mars, what's not to understand? Why are they saying you wouldn't understand? It's the thing is the reality of what this is. What they're doing is they're doing this theory of wow. They're doing these weird things that are driving you to realize this ain't true. This ain't true. The world ain't flat. The sun doesn't go around the earth. Things aren't solid. We're moving at 1,000 miles an hour. We're not at the center of the universe. wrong, wrong, wrong. And that's what they're doing. They're doing this paranormal stuff that takes you and gets you into awe and curiosity. And when you've got awe and curiosity, you're going to do science. As long as you think you've got all the answers, you're never going to explore. That's what they're doing. They're forcing us to explore and get the answers. And I absolutely maintain the people you got to talk to are the people that are interacting with the phenomenon. I'll leave it at that.
Wow, thank you, Grant. Appreciate it. Well done. Round of applause. Do we have any questions? Yep. Okay, hang on. There you go. I'm gonna turn the camera around.
Okay, this on?
Yep, it's on.
It's okay. My name is Robert Best. I'm a retired steelworker, and I've been watching this stuff for years. And I think I've got this figured out, and I would like your opinion on what I think here. So I think the biggest cover-up is Operation High Jump in Antarctica. And I think once the aliens realized that we had nuclear power and atomic bombs, they were concerned about us losing a planet that harbors many diversified life.
Yeah.
And as such, I believe they're here and they are under Antarctica. And the countries that have bases there have made an agreement that there are no flyover zones. So they want to be kept secret. And in return, the aliens have negotiated with our governments and said, look, we will bleed out technology as we see fit that you're able to handle this extra technology that we give you. And it's obvious that they have no emissions from their craft. So it's not a matter of propulsion. It's a matter of manipulating gravity using probably fusion, because fusion compared to fission is like a horse and cart compared to a modern car. And that's my opinion. I want to see what you think about what my opinions are. Thank you.
Okay. The Antarctica thing, I doubt. I don't think they have to hide anywhere. If you take a look at their technology, they can appear, disappear. Like Susie Hansen tells a story. They took her back. She's in New Zealand. They took her back. They said, we're going to go back to your place through the world, through the earth. She said, you're going to do what? And they shifted from one dimension to another. They went through the earth and then they shifted back again. And so their technology is so far beyond our technology. For example, if you talk about the people, and this includes John Ramirez, who is this high-level intelligence guy at the CIA, who says they don't even have craft. He said, I go to a planet, it's an ice planet or something. He said, there's not even a craft. I don't even have a craft. And when you talk to these people who talk about the technology, it's not just anti-gravity. It's this idea that they say, go within, where do you want to go? So you say, okay, my one friend said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. He said, okay, Ron, it's within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then we'll go there. And he said, it took 1 second, and he said, looked out the window, and there was the Milky Way off in the distance. That's 70,000 light years in 1 second. People have told me they've gone across the galaxy instantaneously. So this technology is this way beyond what we've got. Now, the nuclear thing, yeah, they are very interested. One of the things I disagree with people are putting is, oh, they're interfering with our nuclear weapons. The stories that you hear is 1967. Can you get a story that's a little bit older than 1967? This hasn't happened forever. The last nuclear incident that I'm aware of was at Warren Air Force Base in 2010. So this hasn't happened for a long time. It's only happened a couple times. So they're giving us this message that, yeah, we can shut the nuclear missiles down. And they're very concerned about this thing because, as you point out, that we can take this planet out. And they basically, the Canadians were told, AFA told the Canadian government, we are not allowed to interfere. We can stop a nuclear exchange. And to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange, they told the Canadians we could take the moon in front of the entire world. We could split it in half, put it back together to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices. They can't come here and do our lessons. So the technology, like the anti-gravity, so you hear like the Ron Pandolfi will say the anti-gravity stuff is loons, crooks, and worse. If they're talking anti-gravity, I had a meeting, as I said, I had a meeting with this Tim Taylor guy. And if you've heard about him, he's the guy that has all the inventions. He's the black ops guy at NASA who has all the technology and stuff like that. I had a meeting with him in 2014. He showed me a cell phone. He said, take a look at this, Grant. What do you think of this? These two guys, it's a painting. These two guys are flying through space. And I said, I don't know, Tim. I don't know. It doesn't mean anything to me. And then he shows me another painting of these balls going down a tunnel, and you can see them getting smaller as you go down the tunnel. And I said, I don't know. And he showed me another painting, and I go, I don't know, Tim. And then he shows me on the side of a building, these outer space things on the outside of a building. I go, I don't know what you're talking about, Tim. I have no idea. And then he shows me this parkade, and there's this 56 Chevy on top of a parkade. And he says, take a look in the back seat. He says, you can see that? I said, yeah. And he said, there's a postcard. And I said, yeah, I can see the postcard. And he said, you know what it says? I said, no, what's it say? He says, it's some guy writing to his girlfriend. He said, I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you. I said, that's what it says. And he says, yeah, you know where this is? I said, Tim, I have no idea where this is. And he says, it's the Hughes Aircraft Building. I said, I still don't know what you're talking about, Tim. I have no idea. And he said, it's the Hughes Aircraft Building outside of LAX. That's where they had the jump room. I said, what? The jump room? And the jump room is the whole idea about time travel, that they take these kids and they put them in Barack Obama was supposed to be in the jump room. They take them up to the 6th floor, on the elevator, the 5th floor, and then they go sideways. And then you're suddenly on the other side of the world. And that's what Ryan Bledsoe, Chris Bledsoe's son said, that Tim told him the same. Tim was hinting to me, but he told him the same thing. He said, we have time travel. So what I'm saying, my interpretation, I may be wrong. The anti-gravity stuff is a rough base. We're going the wrong direction. It's got to do with portals. I have a video of Ron Pandolfi, who's the guy who briefs the president of the United States. His wife says to him, Ron, so what do you say? Ron says, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. We're at a turning point right now where there's about to be a breakthrough. The next time John, and he points to this John Sillison guy who's sitting beside him, we went to UCLA with him when he got his PhD. He said, next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again. And I went, oh, and I grabbed this off the video, and I got this video. I can give it to anybody that wants. And that's what Tim Taylor said. We got this technology. So he said to me, he's showing me these photographs, and these two guys are flying through space. And the one guy's old, the one guy's young, and look like they're in pajamas. And then he said, you know where that photograph is? And I'm going, no, where is it? He said, it's right outside the elevator. And I'm going, it is. I said, next time I go to LX, I'm going to go to this place. So I actually contacted this Andy Basiago, the guy that claimed as a kid that they were moving him and Barack Obama through this time travel. And they were going to Mars, and they had this colony on Mars, and that they're able to do this portal thing. And the portal thing, I say every time, and I've done this for 50 years, every time I go after anti-gravity, it ends up at a dead end. Every time I go after portals, it absolutely goes somewhere. I'm an expert on Mission Rama. I wrote 2 books of Mission Rama about them opening. They call them Zendras, where they raise their vibration. This is all about vibration. That's what Tesla said. This is all about vibration. There's no physical world. It's vibration. They're vibrating at one level. We're vibrating at this level, creating this physical world. They're coming into our vibration. They slow their vibration down to come into our world. Then they go back into their vibration just by raising their vibration. People who are around the grays say you can't be around the grays for very long because they vibrate so heavily. It's very hard to be around a gray. And so you have this sort of thing where Mission Rama, they raise their vibration through meditation, through prayer, through oming and all this kind of stuff. And the beings lower their vibration. And I go through 3 portals. The most amazing story that I ever heard. This is a true story. This happened in 2020. And I can produce the video of 3 of the people that were in this. These are Latino people. Mission Rama is all Latino. They're all Roman Catholic. They're all very religious. And I say to people, I defy you. Mission Rama, there's 25,000 of these people around the world, these Latino people. I defy you to find any of them who's ever seen a gray, a reptilian, or a mantid, because you are producing the alien. Your mind is producing the alien. They see their beings, they're like coming out of the Bible. They got beautiful, they got robes, they got these hair and stuff like this, but they're able to open these Zendras. And they put 7 people in the Zendras. I interviewed these people who are in the Zendra. I said, you were in the Zendra. They open this thing, and the alien's in there, and they walk into this Zendra thing, and it sounds like you're underwater. They're talking, and they sound like they're underwater. And I said, you were in there? And I said, what did you see? He said, well, it's this tall guy, he was 10 foot tall, Antarel, and he was standing there, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. He was saying something to me, and he was saying something else. Everybody's having a different experience. They're all having experience. And then one guy's a Navy guy, 24-year Navy veteran. And I said, hey, were you in the 2015 one, the 2014? I talked to those people, and they're all running for cover. They didn't want to talk. They knew I was coming to talk about the Zendra. They didn't want to be. We're just Latino people. We don't want to get involved in this. We're not proud and stuff like that. And they basically all told me. And then so this other guy, I said, hey, you were in the Zendra, and hey, the 2015, they said it was a hologram. So instead of a solid being, it was the same being, but he was a hologram. He said, what do you mean a hologram? I said, well, yeah, all the other 7 people said it was a hologram. He said, Grant, I'll tell you what. So I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. It was not a hologram. He was solid. But everybody else said it was a hologram. And this is this whole deal. So the best story I ever heard, they have this event. You can go to Mission Rama to this event. They have it August. There's 2 people hold it. And they may open a Zendra. They have what's called program sighting. When I had, they said there's going to be a program sighting at 9:33. 9:33 over my head. Boom, this thing starts flashing over my head. But I'd seen something much more dramatic. So I go, it's nothing. You know, it's like, it was pretty interesting that they got the time. 2 people had predicted the time when this thing would flash over my head. So every year the people go there. So 2020 was COVID. So I didn't go. And this being by the name of Adama said, if you get 110 people, I will show up. So they get 44 people. They don't get enough, but they're sitting there in the middle of the night, and they have the program sighting Saturday night. I don't know if they saw a being, which I've got the video of. They take this being, and there's this being in the forest, and it looks like somebody in a robe, and it moves through a different tree and stuff like that. It's really weird. They pick it up accidentally as they're filming. Then at night, there's 9 people. I've got 3 of these people on camera. They're there, and they're having a birthday party. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. They're in what's called the sand flats. So it's all trees all over the place, millions of trees. And there's this one area, it's all sand, and it's open. And they're sitting in the middle of this sand flat thing, and they're having a birthday party. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And they're sitting there, and all of a sudden the one girl who's an intuitive, because that's the thing, these experiencers know when they're around. And she says, they're here. Adama's here. And he said, how do you know? I said, no, I can feel he's here. And that's the thing, is once you've touched the being, once you've touched the craft, that's what Chris Bledsoe told me. Once you touch the craft, when it's there, you know, because you know the vibration. It's here, it's here. You can feel the vibration. You've touched the craft. So she said, they're here, he's here. And they said, whoa, oh, she's there, look. And she pointed over to the edge of the forest, and there was a light there. And they said, it's at the campsite. Everybody said, it's at the campsite. Somebody's got a light on in the middle of the night. She says, no, that's them. They're there. Hey, they say we should come and see them. And then the people go, we're not going to go over there. It's like, you can't see your hand in front of your face. There's potholes and stuff. And they go, we're not going over there. Somebody's going to break their leg walking across this field in the middle of the night. And so then she goes, oh, hang on. They said, that's okay. They'll come to us. And they go, and this is like, it's like the elephant. She says, like elephant. Blah, 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 blah. And these things are coming, and they're all just petrified. And they're sitting there. And so these 9 people all hold hands, and they're just absolutely petrified. And they said, suddenly they're levitated in the air. Remember, I got 3 of them hold this story on camera. They're levitated in the air. They're up in the air. And these beings are coming, and they're just absolutely petrified. And then the one guy says, and it was so weird. We started to ohm. We didn't know what to do. So we ohm, and they're ohming. And they said, something, we're underwater. And as soon as I said that, I go, they're in a Zendra. They've opened the Zendra, and these people are inside the Zendra, because that's what they say. It sounds like you're underwater. So they're there, and they're ohming. And then all of a sudden the beings come, and the beings start to ohm. And they're just petrified. They just don't know what to do. And I said, there was Dama was there? I said, yeah, there was a Dama. I said, was he by himself? No, there was other beings with him. And I figured, because usually there's a big being, and then there's 2 8-foot beings beside them. And I said, so I assumed there's going to be these other 2 beings. And I said, well, so how many other beings were there? And I remember the guy from San Francisco. He was an older guy. And these are like gardeners. These aren't, professors. And these are gardeners and just ordinary people. And he says, Grant, there was as many beings as there was trees in the forest. What? It's like as many beings as there was trees in the forest. I said, what did they look like? He said they were etheric beings. And this is the bottom line. I say, this whole thing, you're pretending to be a human. I'm pretending to be human. They're pretending to be aliens. Everybody, you got to remember the basic thing of philosophy is remember who you actually are. You are a puppet on a stage. Your higher self, your soul, the part that comes in and plays a role. And then when you leave the stage, you go, oh, that was just a play. I was a play. And then when it's your next life, when you go into the next life, if you have and all the experiencers will tell you, 25% of experiencers will say they were talked about reincarnation. So when you go into the next lifetime, this lifetime is going to be a forgotten dream. We came in here at this time to do something, to be involved in this, to raise consciousness or whatever it is. We're in this sort of idea that there's a play. You got to remember who you actually are. You are the person watching the play. Because you played King Henry VIII in grade 12 high school does not mean you're not King Henry VIII. No, you're playing King Henry VIII. So they're coming in. That's what the being said. When we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't need to take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. And you can do the same thing. And that's what this other one said. That would not best describe who I am. I'm an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos. So they come in and they're playing this sort of role. We're playing this sort of role. And the idea is to learn lessons. So this is the whole thing is it's way more etheric. If you talk to the people, they'll talk about, for example, a lot of them, John Mack has cases. You'll see, I think it's 25%. They'll say Chris Bledsoe, for example. Chris Bledsoe is being regressed because he had these headaches, these horrible headaches. So the Harvard psychiatrist regresses him. And he says, he's talking to me, he says, oh, so Chris, you're there. Oh, where's my son? I'm so scared. Yeah, get me out of here. And he's in the craft and he's reliving this. And then they said, so Chris, when did you first meet these beings? He said, they've been with me since before I was born. And then the guy said, really? Were they in your last lifetime? And he said, yes. 25% of people say the being was with them in their last lifetime. If that's true, everything changes. The whole thing about technology and nuts and bolts, and that just changes. It changes the whole thing. This being, you were in this thing, and it's the idea that we all make agreements and we come in to do these agreements. It's almost like if you did the thing with Dolores Cannon or Susie Hansen. It's the idea of the three waves. They talk about this idea of the three waves have volunteered to come into the world at this time to raise the consciousness. And there's the first generation, third, second, and third, and we all have our roles to play. That at this point in world history, the consciousness has to be raised. That the world's going to be on the point of destroying itself. And then they say, oh, they got this problem in the world. And everybody's, I'll volunteer. I'll go. And so when people are complaining about your situation in life, you got to remember, whatever situation you're in, if this is true, then you chose to come here at this time, in this place, in the middle of whatever mess you're complaining about. And maybe you came for a reason. You came at this time, this place, in the middle of this mess because you said, I volunteer. I'll go and help out. I'll try to raise consciousness. And that's what that seems to be the bottom line of what this is all about. It's going to be a lot more spiritual than people think it is. And it's going to be a lot less physical, and it's going to be 1,000 times more complex. I've looked at this. I used to think it was ET. When I saw it in 75, it was very simple. It was ET. And the more I've gone along, the less I think it's ET. The more I go like, wow. But anything in nature looks that way. If you look at amoeba, you say, oh, it's just dividing. And then you start to realize there's 12 quadrillion atoms that all sort of go together within a couple of hours. And there's 670 billion base pairs. And this thing puts these base pairs together, and then it puts life, and it can duplicate itself. And you're going like, oh, it's happening by accident. It's like, give your hand a shake. Come on, this is a very, very complex world. And the more you look at it, and that's what's happened with UFOs. The more you look at UFOs, the more complex the whole thing gets. And that's where the government just sort of throws up their hands and goes like, they're running the show. That's what Jim Semivan said. He was asked, some guy, John Alexander said, oh, no, the government doesn't have a program. If they had a program, I would have known about it. And Jim Semivan said, I was briefed. Let me guarantee you they have a program. And he said, okay, so who's running it? And he said, they are. That's what people don't realize. They're running the show. Why don't they disclose? Because they're doing a program. They're not going to disclose. They're doing something else rather than flying around. And a lot of people have sightings. So I'll say the guy has a sighting. I'll say, hey, so you saw a UFO? And they go, yeah. So what was it doing? Same answer every time. It goes, man, it was just sitting there. And I go, do you think it saw you? I think so. Do you think you knew that you saw it? I think so. Do you think it was purposely there for you? Yeah, I think so. Anybody else see it? Just me. And that's how you get this whole idea, is you start to think like maybe this is all random or what. I have a big business guy friend here, super powerful guy here, and he had an experience. He's at the end of a movie, 2.75 hour movie, 15 minutes before the movie, he says to his wife, he's at a cabin. He's never had a UFO sighting. He's at a cabin. He has a big cabin in Western Manitoba. So he's there, and then he says to his wife, I think I'm going to go out and skywatch. She goes, what are you doing? There's 15 minutes left of the movie. Why would you go now to skywatch? He said, I just like to go skywatch. And he goes in, takes his laser. He walks out, and this UFO goes, flies in front of him. He goes, beep, hits it with a laser. And then a couple months later, him and his wife have a sighting. And he sees this ball of fire rolling around. And then he's telling it at a cocktail party one time. And he tells a story, and his wife says, what are you talking about? He says, well, yeah, I was. Remember, you were on the deck. You were standing beside me. She says, that wasn't what it was. It was a metal craft. He said, with a metal craft. And he saw one thing. She saw something else. And so he had a psychic, one of the top psychics in the United States. He hires her, and he says to her, he says, so where were the aliens from that I was looking at? Where those crafts, where are they from? What do you mean? They weren't from anywhere. You sent them. You sent them to wake yourself up. And that's when you start, when the phenomena gets really weird, where you start realizing, like, am I part of this thing? Am I imagining this thing? And that's why I say, if you look at a book called Beyond UFOs, it goes through these patterns. They interviewed 4,200 people. And you start to realize that this is way more complex and much more revealing, is that 4,200 experiencers who claim that they had contact with non-human intelligence. And what you'll see is that 60% of them say At one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe or everything about themselves. And it's like, well, why would you not talk to this person? And they'll say that, or 31% of near-death experiences will say, at one point during their experience, they had the answer to everything in the universe. 37% of all experiencers say they've had a near-death experience. So what's the chances you got abducted by an alien and then you've had a near-death experience? What's the chances that you got 37%? Is this happening randomly? And you start realizing, hey, maybe there's something going on here in the background, that I'm part of this whole thing. And that's what I say. I mean, you have all these scenarios, but the bottom line is it has this weird sort of aspect, and people don't realize, like they talk about orbs. I mean, orbs, first UFO sighting, Kenneth Arnold, they had orbs. The hitchhiker, this hitchhiker thing. Hitchhiker thing was the first Maury Island, 1947, where the metal drops. And I even talk about the metal. So they drop metal. So why do you have, there's a bunch of crafts that have been intact. So why are they dropping intact crafts? Why are they dropping metal? And it's, people say, well, it came, it's falling off the UFO. And I go, it flew 1,000 light years across the universe, and you actually believe that pieces start falling off this thing, and all the pieces are always like this big. And no two pieces are the same. No two UFOs are the same. I'll maintain no propulsion systems are. I even asked George Knapp, Area 51, Bob Lazar, 115. That's a propulsion system. Has anybody else ever reported 115? Nobody has. It's like, that's a one-time thing. All the 9 crafts that Bob Lazar said, they're all different. And this is this whole idea, is you go, they're all different. And the thing just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And that's where you sort of, I think the government, you sort of throw your hands up and you say, this thing's so way beyond us in terms of trying to understand this stuff, that Eric Davis said, 1989, they took it off. They couldn't figure it out. Or Jacques Vallée says, this is like, you have a cow. Go take your cell phone, throw it in front of a cow and have a conversation. This is what it's like. It's like, the cow has no clue what's going on. It's things so far advanced. And Eric Davis said in 1989, they took it off the table because they could not figure it out. And every 7 or 8 years, they go back with their new technology and see if they can figure this thing out. So they've got crafts and bodies. And that's what Jim Semivan says. Because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what you're dealing with. This thing is so far beyond anything that you can possibly imagine. Can appear, disappear, come into your room, appear as a lot of people will say the being Chris Bledsoe. The first time he saw the being, it was 7 foot tall, it was bluish green. The second time he saw it, it had hood on, and it was this etheric being. And that's what I think the bottom line is. We're etheric beings. When you die, you become this etheric being. You're like a ball of light. And then you take on another body and you go back in. And that's what they are. They appear as this ball of light. So you'll see a lot of people say orbs, and it turned into an alien. So they can move around as these balls of light. That's our true essence. We're making the mistake that we think we're these physical beings and all this kind of stuff. And you're just taking, it's like you playing a puppet on the stage.
Hey, thanks, Grant. Appreciate that. I got one more question here, then we'll turn it over to the Fargo group.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron, for giving us this presentation and for taking time to answer our questions. You just answered quite a few. I've got 2 pages of questions that I brought, and I have Managing Magic, which I wanted to know before I asked the crucial question I actually had. There seems to be some contradictions here about where the other intelligences are. You've spoken before about how Dr. K. Randall May helped Christopher Kit Green identify where there was a base off of California. And we also had Pat Price, one of the premier remote viewers, who identified different locations on Earth where there were bases. And we had Jim Semivan, who I think reported in one of the interviews that basically there are these ultra-terrestrials that were living with it. We're actually living with this intelligence on this planet. And so if they're etheric beings and they don't actually need bases and locations on Earth, are we dealing with different types of levels of beings that are coming in?
Or they're playing the role. They're playing because that's where we're in. So you go back 1896, they have the wooden ships. So people say it's extraterrestrial. Come on, Grant, it's extraterrestrial. I say, seriously? You seriously believe that Martians flew through the vacuum of space on wooden ships with propellers and stuff? They're going according to what we believe. Barbara Streisand's son is a full-blown experiencer. He said when he talked to them, he said They told him, when we come into your world, we go into your head and we see what's ever in your head, and it is with that we teach you a lesson. So if you're in fear, you're gonna use fear at the lesson. If you're whatever you have. So they're sort of they're influencing us. They got to deal with you at the level they are. In terms of the bases and stuff like that, the way it seems to be heading is this idea when you got Donald Hoffman, who's this professor now, who says time and space is doomed. This is where we're starting to go. Is there such a thing as time and space? And I say, if there's no such thing, if it's a creation of the human mind, because that's what people say when you're in this experience. Chris Bledsoe said to me, I said, Chris, did you see the engine when you were moving you around, when you were gone for 4 hours? He said, Grant, it was 4 months. It was like 4 months. It wasn't 4 hours. So then you start going like all these people, that time and space seems to disappear. You can go instantly across the galaxy. Then you've got to wonder, is there time and space? So if there's no time and space, how many universes can you fit on the head of a pin? It may be all here and now. That's when the aliens they say to these people, and I've got at least two, I couldn't go back and re-interview these people, but at least two of them said, the being said to them, it is within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then you'll go there. So you take a look at the remote viewing program. Is the person going somewhere? Are they, flying? And because when they have a remote viewing, they say the target's 453-709, and the person says, okay, I'm there. I mean, he doesn't say, hang on, I'm flying to the site, I'll be there in a second. They're instantly there. And the whole concept is it's all inside your head. This idea that this whole idea that there is no film projector in your head. There is no sound inside your head. What you are seeing is a creation of your mind. It's all being collected together. And there's actually blind spots in your vision because the nerve goes through the retina. There's blind spots that the mind fills in, these blind spots in your vision. And you start realizing that where's the mind? You think it's in the head. No, it's not in the head. So what's really going on? So if you have an out-of-body experience, you say the brain is creating consciousness. But if you have an out-of-body experience, you look down, you see your head, and you say, is consciousness in the head? No, it's not. Consciousness is floating around the room here, and there's my head down there. And that's where everything starts to get this ooly thing where what are we really dealing with? What are we? And when people talk about there's no time and space, that this is an illusion, then you start understanding how people can say I was here and I was on the other side of the galaxy instantaneously, and they told me to go within my mind, and this whole thing that it may be all within you, or as Stephen Greer uses the expression, the Sufi expression. He says, you see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. That may be what it's is. That there is no time and space. There is no, it's all this stuff where it's inside you and it's all creation, that what you're seeing is not out there. It's in your mind, and there's no colors. There's no, everything it looks like it's solid. It's not solid. I had the experience a couple of weeks ago of seeing everything vibrate. We actually had a channeler. I watched channelers very closely. A channeler said at one point, the space inside the electron is vibrating. I went, what? The space is vibrating. So I went to this Ron Pandolfi, the highest level guy, the guy that supposedly briefs the president. And I said, ask Ron. I told the guy, ask Ron, the space vibrates. He said, yeah, space vibrates. That's how we move information from one universe to the other. I went, wow.
Okay, Grant, I don't want to cut you off, but we got a lot of questions here. So
okay,
hang on, just one more here.
Okay, to respect time, Grant, thank you again.
Yeah.
So what I really would like to know is, after WOW, what are we to do, if anything, to enhance ourselves and the world around us in a positive way? As this, we've already experienced the WOW effect. Have you developed for yourself a particular praxis or methodology for getting into the field? And what's the best way to approach that? Thank you.
I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. It talks about 70 different modalities. So trauma is a big one. I use psychedelics because I could never do the meditation. And the other one I use is when I had my initial download experience, I was in a lecture where I didn't want to be. And that's what I call daydreaming. So it's like being in the shower. You're not really paying attention. You're sort of thinking about something else, and boom, it pops into your head, which is Gary Nolan, if you're familiar with Gary Nolan for Stanford. I asked Gary, because Gary's doing the same thing. I said, hey, Gary, give me the quote. You said that you can do this. And he basically said, I don't know how it works, but I know how to make it work. And he said, I don't know if there's little elves in my head, but he goes through the whole process. He thinks the process through. And then he says, I write the thing down on a piece of paper beside the bed. And he said, either the next morning or within the next 2 days, the answer's in my head. So yeah, you can get in the field. And what the whole field is, it's the ability to shut down the left brain. The left brain, and this promotion I want to make. Definitely do not avoid this, There's a thing called telepathy tapes, the podcast. I'm about to interview this woman in the next week. And then Whitley Strieber and I are going to interview her. There are kids who are autistic kids who are 100% telepathic. They get 100 out of 100. And the whole idea is if you're autistic and nonverbal, which these kids are, your left brain is damaged. The left brain is what's causing the noise in the signal. And that's what meditation is. Gives your left brain, follow the breathing, do this, do that. And you're giving the left brain something to do, and you pop into the field. All the stuff, if this is true, you need to answer to everything in the universe, then the aliens know the answer to everything in the universe. They're not here to explain look at plants and stuff like that. They know the answer to everything. They're doing something different, and that's the whole thing. So the answers are in the field, and it's the ability to go in the field. That's for my own personal thing. I basically look at this idea: who am I really? So the idea of reincarnation, that you come into the world with a mission, and when you leave, according to Michael Newton, if you read Journey of Souls, then you will see Journey of Souls say you go in front of council and they ask you one question: how to work out, because you planned it. You can't say, the government did this, or my mother-in-law, the dog ate the homework. They're going, time out. This is about you. How did it work out? You planned it. And they go, oh, I should have done this. I was going to do that. I was, all this sort of stuff. And that's basically what it comes down to. So the whole purpose of life is, why did I come into the world? When I leave, they're going to ask me how to work out. And so all I have to worry about is, why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing? What you do, what everybody else does, what the government does, is totally irrelevant. What am I here for? It has nothing to do with anybody else. And that's my basic principle of life. But all the answers in the field. This is the idea. Everything's in the field, and you get it through near-death experiences, shared-death experiences. A guy in a float tank told me this. The same thing. People keep saying this thing. I knew the answer to everything in the universe. And when I came back, they told me I couldn't have it. Or Betty Hill. Betty Hill was given a book, and they took it back from her. And Betty Andreasen was given a book, and she's going to show it to her daughter, and then the book was gone. They do the same thing. They give you it, and they drag you along, and then they pull it back. They're not here to give you the answer. They're here to hint you, to move you in a right direction. But it's up to us. Why are we here? And the understanding is, when I leave, or Whitley Strieber's wife said, when he died, he wrote a book with Whitley Strieber, with his wife, after she died. And she said to him at one point, she said, Whitley, I'm no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you. Which means, Whitley, I'm going on to another life. I was Anne to you. We had a great time. We worked on this sort of stuff, but I'm no longer Anne. I'm off doing something else. And that's why I think you've got to keep, even if it's not real, you have this principle that we have responsibility, that we came in. It's not a random world where, we're here and things are randomly happening to us. We're planning part of what it is. And when you start looking at psychology and stuff like that, you do not get cured until you take responsibility. Whether you're responsible for it or not, when you take responsibility, then you start to move. So it's more this idea of this is a play. They're playing their role, we're playing our role, and people will describe this, this phenomena of being out of their body or having near-death experiences. Or even Alexander, the most famous near-death experience, you may not know, he saw aliens when he was in the near-death experience, but the publisher pulled it up that it's just too weird. And you start seeing these crossovers, like people are abducted, and they say, my dead dog was on there, or my husband was on there. And you start seeing, so what is the deal? Like, how do these dead people? And it's like, it's in the field. They're in a field. They're in this vibration. That dead person is in the vibration. And it's this whole idea that all the paranormal phenomena are connected. They're not separate. They're all connected. When this is a book I'm going to call The Big Game, is coming out, 2-part book. And it goes all these things. You see it happening here, it's happening there. All the phenomena is happening. We want to parse it. We want to say there's UFOs, then there's paranormal phenomena, and there's remote viewing. No, it's all the same thing. It's all the same phenomena. It's all made out of consciousness. So God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and we are creating the heavens and the earth through consciousness. Everything is made of consciousness. We have this idea that that matter creates consciousness, and even quantum physics is now saying consciousness is primary. Consciousness creates matter. That's what you got to remember.
All right, thank you, Grant. We'll turn it over to Fargo.
Yeah, we do have a few questions here. I'm going to have them come up here just 1 second so that you can hear what they're saying.
Grant, thanks for the presentation. It's amazing, so much information, and I know you've written a lot of books, and you have a lot of information on this subject. Could you steer us towards some material or more information about the idea that UFOs are related to consciousness? I know, other than what you just spoke about.
Well, the big one is the book that was confirmed by the U.S. government, and that's the one about the flying the craft. That the craft is moved around through consciousness. And Lukatsky gave an interview to George Knapp and what's his name? Gave an interview, and it was at that point where he said, "I want to let you know that the technology is a combination of psychic and material stuff, and that's what it is. The craft is alive. You touch the thing, the craft is alive, and whatever you think is what the craft does." And it's this idea that that's how they move the craft around, and that's now being confirmed. Even Jim Semyon has talked about that. I wrote that before these people came forward. That is the big thing in terms of consciousness. I've written the book on consciousness with inspiration and stuff like that, where you think you're getting inventions and you realize that all this stuff is connected. And this next book that's coming up, the one on the big game, goes through all the paranormal phenomena, and it shows this idea that it's all connected, it's all consciousness. Consciousness is primary, and when you understand that, then you start to realize that it's a very complex world that's not as nuts and bolts as you think. It's the illusion thing. It's like the people who sat in caves 5,000 years ago. They came up with the idea of Maya, the illusion and stuff like that. They knew because they sat in caves. Their left brain shut down. They picked up these answers, and we're now recreating it. The quantum physics now recreating it. That consciousness is primary. Like even the main quantum guy that invented quantum physics says nothing gets behind consciousness. Consciousness is primary. And they realized that these Eastern people were right. And it's the idea of Maya. But the Maya is so strong that you keep going back, and there's a physical world that's solid and stuff like that. And we know it's not solid. We know it's 99.99999 space, but it looks like it's solid. It looks like the sun's going around the earth, stuff like that. And so good luck with that. I mean, it's you'll see a lot of people starting to talk about consciousness, but consciousness is ignored. They will not talk to us because it's still woo-woo. We want nuts and bolts. We want to look respectable. So that's why you'll see people in Congress will not. They as I said, if you're a consciousness person, you got to be careful. You always look over your shoulder. You're going to find someone sneaking up on you with a cross and nails. The UFO community hates consciousness. They want nuts and bolts. They want technology. They want, we want it yesterday. It's this material world that we're sort of enveloped in, and the consciousness thing. We're still a few years off from understanding the consciousness connection, I think.
Thank you, Grant. We have another question here in Fargo.
Yep.
Hi, thank you, Grant. My name is Charles. I really enjoying your presentation that you're giving us today here. So I kind of have, well, one big question and one kind of shorter one.
Yeah.
But the first one would be with Robert Bigelow. Is he kind of, you think, ahead of the game right now with his new endeavor for consciousness? Or is he, has it been something that has been going on for a while and it's just now coming out, I guess, because he was doing like grants and different things, I know, for
Okay, I can answer that. Most people don't know, Bob Bigelow actually started a seat for consciousness studies at University of Las Vegas, Nevada. That was like 30 years ago. He put in $3.7 million into that. He has a situation where his son died, his grandson died, and it's this thing where there may have been, been a suicide and stuff like that. And he's been obsessed. So when he started the NIDS organization in 1996, he gave his initial lecture and he said, we want to study UFOs and life after death. And then one guy said, why don't we just do ESP and Sasquatches? They were insulted because he's into this thing about near-death experiences. And now he's back into consciousness. So he knows that consciousness is primary. He knows this connection to consciousness. And yet his stuff is not really released in terms of his material. He's one of the guys that says it's proprietary, that when I get it, I own it. But he's had all the other experiences. He had the orbs in his house. He had the thing where they said, what was Skinwalker all about, Bob? And he said it was about, it's all about messaging and games. And he talked about the fact that he could make orbs appear on camera. He would put little jacks and balls, and then the thing would move it around and stuff because he was talking messages. So he was communicating telepathically with this intelligence at Skinwalker Ranch. So he knows, because he produced it himself, that this is a key part. And he's now doing consciousness again, which indicates that he realizes the importance of consciousness to this field.
And I think that's kind of why he's, it's almost like recruiting people. Am I wrong? Or okay. So
that's the way it would work. I mean, if you're a rich guy, that's the whole idea. You go to people who've got the answers. So what he was doing, he was bringing in like Kit Green and the top people on all these different subjects because he could afford to bring these people in for huge money and pick their brain. Why would you not do that? And that's why I say, if you get some kid who's totally telepathic, why would you not study that? Why would you take that off the table? That is extreme. But even this woman said she couldn't sell this story to any of the networks on these kids who are 100% telepathic. That to me is like the most important thing. It's way more important than UFOs, is how do these kids do it? Or you get people who can, they can't tell you what two times 3 is, but they can, when you say to what are the next 12 days, 12 years that Easter will fall on April the 1st, and within 30 seconds he's answered that, but he can't multiply 2 times 3. You go, where is this guy getting this information? That to me is, the savant thing is way more important than the UFO thing. When you start, where are these people getting this material? How do they do this? It's unbelievable.
So I appreciate that. Then the second part would be, I listened to whenever you asked Cheney about, the question about if he had been briefed or anything. And then also David Grush had just came out not too long, well, he actually came out with the interview with, I think it was Wilcox or somebody that interviewed him, and he asked him who was the top of the pyramid, and for the UFO classification, he named Dick Cheney, according to what Grush told him.
The problem with that is what I mentioned before. He may be at a 40,000 foot level, but you're not going to know who's at 60,000 feet until you've been briefed at that level. So everybody thinks they know what's happening at the top of the pyramid. And like Help Put Up was asked the question one time, could you name the 12 guys? And he said, I could probably name the 12 guys that are running the show. And he was asked, well, why don't you name the 12 guys? And he said, because you'd go and do an article in the New York Times, I'd have to deny it, and then everybody would stop talking to me. So, but again, that's why people think the president isn't getting briefed. But how are you going to know that unless you're the president? You wouldn't know if the president's getting briefed or not getting briefed or whatever. It's where you are that people sort of assume they know what's going on above their pay grade when they're just basically at ground level.
Well, Grant, thank you so much for your presentation and all this information. We're running a little bit low on time. I don't know if there's any other questions in, I don't see any in the chat right now, just some comments.
I would tell people, watch this telepathy tape, find it on the podcast. It'll blow your mind. There's 6 episodes of the stuff. I basically said to these people, if it was a fair world, this would be Nobel Prize. The work these people are doing is unbelievable, and it's connected to UFOs. And Whitley Strieber will talk about aliens being autistic and stuff like that. It's absolutely one of the most powerful things I've ever seen in my 50 years of research. It's called the Telepathy Tapes podcast. Kai Dickens is the girl that runs it, and it's absolutely mind-blowing when you start to try to explain how is this happening. You realize the world is not the nuts and bolts world you think it is.
Well, thank you, Grant. You have some thank yous in the chat as well. I don't know if you saw that. Anything else in Grand Rapids?
No, anybody have any other questions? Nope, no questions here.
All right. Well, a huge thank you. We really appreciate your time, Grant. Lots of great information, and we hope to have you on again sometime. Hopefully it won't be so short notice.
Yeah. Thank you for your interest, and I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Grant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chocolate cola. Huh. Well, at least it's not ranch. Yeah, not so much. Not so much of that. You're still here? Do you want some chocolate cola? Yeah, you can go home. It's okay. You can leave. Just, meeting's over. Go. Sheesh. Rest in peace, Mr. Craig.